If you can, go ahead and take your seat. We're going to go and get started. We're going to open the meeting with prayer and recognize Bob Odom to say the prayer.
Thank you, Commissioner. Y'all bow with me. Lord and Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the blessings of life. We thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, and his death on the cross. Save us from our sins. Lord, we ask you to forgive us our sins on a daily basis, Lord. Father, we just seek to honor you in this meeting. We ask that all minds be clear and this commission be blessed. In Jesus' name, amen.
If you'll stay standing and join me in the pledge. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Thank you all for that. Thank you for coming to the Water Summit. A lot of folks are asking, well, what's a Water Summit? Well, we're all new. All three of commissioners are new, and so we want to kind of, with the time we've been in office, we have our constituents and ratepayers call us about issues here and there. So we try to discern where our purview starts or where our authority starts and stops, where DEQ starts and stops, where Department of Health starts and stops, and how we all work together to help serve the ratepayers of the state of Mississippi with Rural Water and Mississippi Municipal League too. So it's a big group, and we all have the same common goal. So basically what this is to kind of help everybody understand everybody's role in delivering the clean, safe drinking water to the people of Mississippi. This is an educational meeting, so we all kind of can come together again to try to have a unified voice and a unified purpose and a goal to identify the problems and then how to solve them together so the people of Mississippi are better at the end of the day. Again, thank y'all for coming. Commissioner Carr, do you have any statements?
Thank y'all for coming. You know, Bible says there's wisdom in a multitude of counsel, and it looks like there's a bunch of folks out there today. And so we ask for y'all to, be respectful to each other. I know these times are hard for everyone. When we come together and we all have different views and different opinions, they're kind of like elbows. Everybody's got at least two. So, and we cherish your opinion. We really do. And it's going to be a learning experience for me too, because I've been grappling for information for 7 months and trying to get my feet underneath me, and it's difficult because times are always changing and circumstances. But that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'll echo Commissioner Carr's statements. You know, we're drinking through a fire hose, so to speak. So we look forward to learning a lot during this today's events, and appreciate everybody's willingness to participate. We're going to start with Mississippi Department of Health, Mr. Bill Moody. You're recognized, Mr. Moody. Appreciate you coming too. Thanks for what you do.
I'm wearing gold today on our 15th celebration. We're going to talk a bit about how, certainly how the drinking water scape of things, spectrum of things that water systems deal with, and how our role fits into it. Thank you, sir. Hey, Ronnie. And so the Bureau of Public Water Supply, our job is to ensure that water systems in the state serve 2.8 million of our citizens that utilize the public water systems. We enforce the requirements of the federal and state Safe Drinking Water Acts. I want to stand over here because I can't see. And we do it through 5 major areas. Big one is monitoring, microbiological, chemical, and radiological monitoring. We work and negotiate with consulting engineers on the design of new plants. So the 97 amendments to the Safe Drinking Water Act, anything new, any new modifications to a public water system, including, say, a subdivision, have to come through our office for review and approval before construction begins. surveys. We do inspections, or what we call sanitary surveys, of every community water system to identify, eliminate operational maintenance problems that might exist that could affect the drinking water quality. We work to enforce and ensure that all the water systems are meeting those Safe Drinking Water Act standards. And then lastly, we licensure of waterworks operators and backflow assembly testers. We train water system officials. We work with consulting engineers, give them some training as to what goes on in our shop. And then we also provide environmental staff both within the department on methods of designing, constructing, and operating public water systems. So we do a lot. But on a side note, we also do something pretty darn important. We deal with and we work we provide admin support to the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund. Lots of money being thrown at it right now through the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law. We've been administering the American Rescue Plan Act, a lot of money that's coming through both for rural water associations. I know our sister agency, the DEQ, is handling water, wastewater, and stormwater, as I remember. We still do the plan review for the drinking water elements, but they're handling that, running that show. So what is a public water system? Pop quiz. Anybody have an idea what constitutes a public water system in the state of Mississippi, or for that matter, the United States? No guesses? Big thing is 15 and 25. 15 connections of 25 persons serving at least 60 days out of the year. Now, community systems, they serve, we'll get into the next slide. Here's another pop quiz. How many water systems does the state of Mississippi have? Just throw out some numbers. 1,100. That looks good. Anybody else got a guess? Nobody? Ronnie, you got a guess? How many public water systems are in the state of Mississippi? 1,500. The correct answer is 1,191. Y'all both kind of floated around it, but that's right. Now, there are three types of systems in the state of Mississippi. There's community systems, there's transient systems, transient non-communities, and non-transient non-communities. Now, the communities are just like everyone, it's just essentially a community system. There's cities, towns, water associations, private for-profit systems that provide water to their customers. Non-transient non-communities are industries, schools, hospitals. And finally, the transients are kind of everything else. Roadside parks, state parks, restaurants that provide their own water source. They all are in part of that. And when you look at the community systems up there, you'll see that lots of different organizations handle those. You know, municipal governments, county governments. You've got, of course, private water associations. Different OR groups represent the spectrum of systems in the state. And so key activities that we perform at the Department of Health. Main one we do is, of course, the inspections and sanitary surveys. On those, we'll be detailing to the water system the status of their system. We'll provide details on the system facilities, what condition they might be in. Poor, good, great. We'll update the design capacity. I know that was a question from Commissioner Stamps at one point when he had asked for some information about how many systems are under a moratorium, meaning they can't add additional customers to their system. And so that list it changes from day to day. They do some work and do well, then they fall off and are no longer under a moratorium. Other half of the spectrum is compliance, updates, and notifications. We provide monitoring issues. We'll look at those when the samples come back. We analyze those at the Mississippi Public Health Laboratory. What condition the systems? Are they meeting those Safe Drinking Water Act standards? Significant deficiencies. When something is identified in the inspection report, the water system will be given a significant deficiency. And that starts the clock to remedy it. Standard is 120 days, but if the system needs more time, maybe it's requires some capital improvements in order to resolve that deficiency, we're willing to work with the system to make that a reality. Providing public notice to system customers. You know, we provide the information, say, okay, you've exceeded that standard water system. Now the water system has to pass that information on to the customers to say, we messed up, we exceeded a standard. here's the notice of exceeding that standard, and then they also have, the system has an opportunity within that notice to say what they're doing to resolve it and make it better. Of course, we provide water quality analysis results all the time to the water systems. People make public records requests. We provide that information to the general public as they want. Now, the responsibilities of the water system, there are a lot of things that fall on the responsible officials to take care of. It's their job. They hire the people that work for them to do the work, but it's still their responsibility to make sure things happen. For example, there are key things that a water system is going to have to do on a day-to-day basis to make sure that the water stays flowing to the customers. Ms. Johnson at the end of the road would like her water to be there, and she'd like it to have adequate pressure. These are those key things that water systems need to be doing to take care of business and make sure the water keeps flowing. So we want systems to provide safe and adequate water, drinking water, comply with the various provisions of the Safe Drinking Water Act, ensure that the O&M duties and responsibilities occur routinely. System officials should follow a trust but verify mantra. You know that the chlorine is in the system, the disinfection system is working. Has your operator gone out there and made sure that it is? Is he or she making routine checks on the system? Proper asset management planning in place. That's a big key thing, as we all know about. We've all seen when systems are having trouble maintaining their infrastructure. Things are getting old. Certain pipes have been in the ground for certainly older than me, but also probably at least some of them about 100 years old. So systems need to be aware of what the status of those assets are. Do you have a well that's been running for 50 years? It's probably living on borrowed time. Is the system taking the appropriate steps to plan for its replacement? Or maybe seek an alternative source where they buy water from someone else. Either way, they fix the problem. Proper emergency planning in place, risk and resiliency assessments, and emergency response planning. This is a big thing, especially in the EPA's world. They want systems to have they know what their risks are and then do something about them before they come back and bite you. EPA, they come down and do periodic inspections in our state as well as all the others, and they will ask questions like, where's your response plan? What have you done with it? Are you maintaining it? Now, we, at the department, we ask to see those plans, but those plans may not be addressing all that they need to address to ensure that they're prepared for the next emergency. And so the big key, the bottom line to it all is sustainability. Is the system going to be able to sustain itself? What is it going to look like in 5 years? What's it going to look like in 10 years? Now, the challenges that a water system has, kind of come around full spectrum here. Determining the time to replace critical assets. Increasing demand of service from their customers. They want the bottle that they see on the shelf in the grocery store, they want their water to look like that too. Overcoming the resistance to rate increases. I know that that's a dirty word sometimes, rate increases, but sometimes you got to bring in more money to cover the repairs, the replacements, the infrastructure that has to be taken care of. There's diminishing resources, and that could take the form of people. It could take the form of just things cost more in order to get what you need to make the repairs, to maintain the system. Rising service expectations of customers. Increasing stringent regulatory requirements. I promise you, from a safe drinking water perspective, the requirements to comply will only get more stringent over time. New research comes into play. They say, hey, we realize that the public health benefit it's not 80 parts per billion anymore. It needs to be 60 parts per billion. And so systems have to be able to meet those challenges to meet those new standards that have been set. Responding to emergencies as a result of asset failures, I think we've seen what that looks like. Protecting system assets, just taking care of them. There's only so much duct tape and baling wire that a system can use to keep something running. Sometimes actual capital improvements need to occur. And of course, one of the big things that's coming up nowadays is cybersecurity. Protections from any sort of operational technology that's been used to maintain the system, but I'd also point out administrative technology, where the bills are coming in. The water systems, some of the water systems, their only way to make money is by selling water, and if their accounts are locked out because someone does a ransomware, a hack of some sort, that's going to be a problem for many small systems. And so I'm getting close to the end here, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about regulations that impact water systems. They're about there's the big four, what I would call their others, but these four usually have a fairly significant impact on the systems within the state of Mississippi. They are the groundwater rule. Mississippi is a groundwater state. There are only 5 surface water systems in the entire state. If you go next door to Alabama, it's like half and half. And so that makes, in some respects, it makes life easier because groundwater is pretty stable. It doesn't change over time. Treatment is fairly by the book, if you will, because the water comes out of the ground at the same type of water quality parameters consistently. And so the groundwater rule is something that affects because we have so many groundwater systems. Disinfection byproducts rule. I don't know if you've heard of that one before. Trihalomethanes, halioacetic acids, those are things that are created from the use of disinfection when it gets with organic matter. Some of those can be higher, and so those systems are required to take action to make some treatment adjustments. Lead and copper rule. Who's never heard of lead and copper rule before? Okay, Ronnie, you don't count. Lead and copper rule is a very, as you know, it made the news significantly back in 2015 in our capital city, and they're working towards resolving all those elements through projects that they're currently doing. And so, but the lead and copper rule not only affects them, but it affects all the other systems in the state. Everybody has to take samples to help comply and find out where their corrosion control issues might be. So that's a big one. It affects Mississippi. And of course, finally, the revised total coliform rule. If you've ever had a boil water notice in response to bad samples, that's where that one comes into play. And so those are the 4 significant ones that impact systems in the state of Mississippi. And then also, as I said earlier, rules never stay the same for very long. The Safe Drinking Water Act requires that existing standards be reviewed every 6 years. And so when they do that, they'll step back, see if the public health benefits per cost are still the same. And in doing that, if it doesn't seem, if new research, new information becomes available, it makes a standard have to change. This is the process through the Safe Drinking Water Act that allows that to occur. New rules, or in particular, that come in 2 parts for at least the lead and copper rule, is the revisions and the improvements. The improvements have not been figured out yet by the Department of Health, by the EPA. Last I heard, they had 200,000 comments they were trying to digest together from the general public and provide me a finished rule, as well as the rest of my colleagues throughout the country, by the end of this year. We will see. But the revisions that are hanging over people's heads right now requires 2 things. A service line inventory, meaning every service line that a water system has, they have to identify what that service line is made of. Is it lead? Is it copper? Is it galvanized line? Is it just plain and simple plastic, both before the meter and after the meter? And then what kind of connector? Is the connector made of lead, or is it just a straight pipe of plastic? Either way, that's what something every water system that's community water system as well as non-transient, non-community water systems have to do by October 16th of this year. Now, we are providing some technical assistance. We've got a contract we're working through in place to help that process. However, it's taking time to put it together, and we've got 227 systems that have completed and met that deadline. We anticipate a whole lot more coming in well before the deadline. Time will tell. Someone's asked what was a potential need that we might have moving forward, and one of the things, as I'm sure Mr. Wells can speak to this well, also is that we always need funding to help maintain the SREP program. It's a Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund, in addition to the ARPA stuff that we work through, but the Drinking Water Loan Fund has been around since 1996 or 97 for us, and we always need some state match money in the process. For every dollar we put out, we contribute, we're able to get $5 back. And with the bipartisan infrastructure law, that's changed a little bit, but it's essentially the same ratio. And so when it comes in, we can turn around and make projects to all types of systems, and certainly we can and have used the program to benefit underserved communities. And so that's the end of my spiel. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. If you can, just a few questions.
Certainly.
And if you don't know that, they're not deep dives, so we'll find out is perfectly okay. Commissioner Carr, you have some questions? First of all, thank you for your presentation.
Yes,
It was
sir.
good.
Thank you.
I learned quite a bit in that, so appreciate it. Just a few questions. How often do you test the water in each water system? How often do you go test the systems for contaminants or any kind of issues?
Certain contaminants are, one of the things I was talking about with meaning that the groundwater is stable. So a lot of things that we routinely, that other states might have problems with, such as VOCs, volatile organic chemicals, or synthetic organic chemicals, we just don't have them. The wells that are serving our systems are deep, and so when you get non-detectable values, then a system can move from like a yearly monitoring to maybe every 3 years. And so it can vary based on the system type, the population, as well as the type of source water they might be having, whether it be surface versus groundwater. So it varies. I think that's the best answer I have, but a lot of things are routinely checked every year, such as nitrates. But understand the spectrum of things that are routinely monitored for in the state is about 100 different things.
Gotcha, thank you. Also, if you go in and a system is failing, and how do you handle a system that you go in and it doesn't pass or it is in trouble? Do you flag them? What kind of enforcement mechanism do you have, or what do you do with a system like that? Or what happens to a system that?
The first thing we try to do is we try to provide them technical assistance. And, depending on the nature of the problem, is it financial? We have somewhat limited ability to make a financial situation better. If the financial, some would argue it's a three-legged stool. There's technical, managerial, and financial capacities that the system has. And if the financial one is off, then it can affect managerial as well as the technical, the ability to maintain things on the system. And so we try to provide, first, we try to run in there with some technical assistance. One of our training partners here provides that assistance. Mississippi Rural Water routinely does a lot of things like that, as well as other organizations we work with. So we try technical assistance first. If we get into situations, eventually that's going to potentially turn into a Safe Drinking Water Act violation in the MCL or inactivity, resolving a significant deficiency. And so we begin that process, calling them after the violations are issued, moving to a hearing process where the system comes to Jackson, sits down with us, talks. We present our case, they present our case, and then there's an administrative order that's issued at that they have to respond to that can be taken to civil court if necessary if they fail to meet all the requirements.
Gotcha. And part of the purpose of this is, I know we've asked before, like if water's not crystal clear, like you said, people want it to look like this. So if it's dirty or cloudy, is it necessarily unhealthy or unsafe to drink?
I would say no, and the reason why I say that, I might get some funny faces, is that a lot of times most of the things that make people upset are aesthetic qualities of water. And for example, iron or manganese. Those particular metals, as it stands right now, are not regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act. They have recommended levels of treatment. If the system exceeds a certain value of iron, say it's 0.5, then we as the department would recommend that they install some sort of treatment to mitigate those problems. Same way for manganese. But if there's something like, I know that the Delta has this a lot, Greenville for a prime example, organic color. Organic color itself is not a regulated contaminant. It can contribute to certain things with other rules, but it's not something that is regulated at this time. Now, if standards were changed to where that applied, and it would be going above and beyond the standards of what the Safe Drinking Water Act mandates, then that would be where we could enforce. We do try to, if complaints come in regarding those items, we do our best to try to encourage the system to take effective action. Sometimes it might be something as simple as implementing a routine flushing program to head off those water quality concerns before they become a problem for the customers. If they know the situation's going to go bad in a month, go out there on week 2 and preemptively take action.
When you identify a violation or what you deem as unsafe drinking water, how are the ratepayers notified?
If it's a MCL violation, we would issue the violation to the water system. The water system would in turn, as required by the Safe Drinking Water Act public notification rule, let the system know that they've done something wrong, and then that notification has to be passed to the customers. The water system has to prove back to us that they've provided that notice to those customers.
Are there any now that, I don't want specifics, but are there quite a few in Mississippi that are in violation now, or are we clean?
I would venture to say routinely we have, I just finished putting together my performance measures for the state legislature, so I have those numbers fresh in my head. About 93% of the systems in the state are, well, let me go back. 86% of the systems in the state represent 86% of the population of system, that water that was provided to customers that did not have a violation in the last 12 months. So that's a pretty good, I would venture to say it's not ideal, but I think that's a pretty good number. And they understand that on the flip side of that, 93% of the systems resolve those violations within the allotted time that was supposed to be for each one.
You alluded to something that we find quite a bit, and it's rates. So that's what we're trying to figure out is, like, if you want water that looks like this, then there's, the way I understand it, there are systems in place or things that you can purchase for a system to make it look like this, but it's more expensive and your rates are going to go up. So I know there's some in my district. There was a particular community that they hadn't had a rate increase in like 10 years. Obviously, I know them. I know the people working on it. They work hard. They're doing everything they can. But to your point, they just didn't have the resources to upgrade or even properly maintain the system. So I know that's a challenge. It's a big challenge. So part of our purpose is to try to educate the ratepayers to say, if you want water like this, if it's cloudy or mineral tint, there are processes to clean it up, but I'm sure it's expensive and it's at a cost. So I know each system is different. So we don't know what the cost is going to be for, the village of Gatman versus the city of South Haven. I know the economies of scale and things like that.
Economy of scale.
But is it a fact to say that you can, if the water was dirty, there are systems to clean it up? It just depends on how much it's going to cost.
That's an accurate statement. It also varies on what the problem might be, as to whether what kind of treatment might be employed to make that fix. And with the advent of additional treatment, do you have the right people to maintain it? Are they certified at the right level? And so there might be a cost associated with the necessary personnel to maintain things. But anything, you can make it all look like that. It's just whether or not there's dollars there. I mean, one of the things that we try to do with the SRF program is we're able to give loans with principal forgiveness. Essentially, it's a grant to a certain degree based on qualifications of, what's the median household income in that space that's being served. And it can get as high as 45%. We're also, with the advent of the bill money, we're able to increase that level beyond 45%. And so, and it's a voluntary program. Systems have to come to us, tell us they want to do the loan with us with principal forgiveness. ARPA was a big game changer, so that's making a lot of improvements. But there's one of the things that people sometimes forget about is the fix might be something as simple as connecting to the neighboring system. And that cost significantly less to lay water line from one system to the other, especially if the system has, the parent system, if you will, has adequate capacity to serve.
There's some economies of scale there.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And then if the water that the one system is providing has corrosion issues, like there was one that I remember in Tate County that had corrosion issues, and the fix, the system had 50 customers, no economy of scale. And so the fix for that was to connect to the neighboring water association. And now that has been done. I think it's going through the process with the public utility staff to do that consolidation piece. And now the customers have water that meets standards, not having to worry about lead and copper problems now. So that was a win.
As we go in, we have constituent complaints, and we'll go out with the help of Kirby Mayfield and some of the municipals and try to figure out what's going on. And what we find out is that almost all of them that we go out and work with are doing fantastic work for what they have. And I think that, again, is a spotlight that we need to shine to say, okay, if you want a certain level of water quality and other things, we need to try to help educate the ratepayer to say, this is what it's going to cost to get there. Do you want that extra cost? And so we don't know the answers to that. And I think that's part of our purpose here is to help educate us. So we are that firewall or that liaison between the ratepayer and whatever water quality or water delivery that you have. So appreciate your comments. Commissioner Carr, do you have any?
Yes. Thank you for your presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
On the testing part of it, is that something y'all do internal?
We have, the Mississippi Public Health Laboratory does a majority of the work related to analyzing samples that we receive from the water systems. We provide all the water quality analysis supplies to the water system included, and that's collected through their water quality analysis fee that we assess them every year. And those supplies are sent to them, fill the bottles up, they send them back to the Mississippi Public Health Laboratory to be analyzed. Sometimes we have to farm some samples out to a private laboratory. It's still under our control. We're still the ones that are doing the legwork on that. But we might farm something out, say, for radiological samples or synthetic organics. We might send those to a private laboratory, and the results would then come back to us, which we would in turn pass back to the water systems.
So is that, when you farm it out, is that in-state? or out-of-state?
We don't have the laboratories that can do certain types of analysis. For example, the radiological, there's not a lab in the state of Mississippi that can do radiological work. We would love to have a lab that could do it, but we don't see that. There's not that capability at this time within the state to do many of the analysis that we need.
Being from the coast, we have natural disasters and the whole state in general. So when the power goes out, what is the process where the health department steps in to assure that the citizens their water quality is up to date? Do y'all go in and test it at that point? Because we know when the pressure drops, then we got infiltration into the lines. So do y'all go out and check that, or how does that work?
In most of those, in cases such as that, there's the system, we provide training to the system operators. And so they know their system better than we do. And so they will gauge the situation. If the situation appears that the water pressure has dropped significantly enough, say that, the hurricane blows through and it shuts the power grid off. One of the things I venture to say is that Katrina was the great equalizer. A lot of systems saw that as a call to action to make sure that they secure their own generator to keep the water pressure up in the event of a power failure. So a lot of systems have took action post-Katrina to ensure that they have proper backup power. There's a couple of systems that still don't, but we encourage them. We made a provision within the emergency loan program to allow systems to purchase generators to prepare themselves preemptively protect themselves in the emergency that might be coming. But with the systems that lose pressure in situations like that, the water system they can choose to notify us. We will assist them in getting a boil water notice out if they want us to. It's their responsibility. But then they will then go into collection mode where once they restore power or stability to the system, they would in turn take bacteriological samples, for example, and then the lab would process them. We'd let them know samples are clear, and then the boil water notice would get released.
Okay. So on your license, when earlier you was talking about the license, is that something that is that continuing education?
Yes,
on the license?
The certified operator regulation requires that a water system operator receive, depending on their tenure, how long they've been, but at the initial start of a new operator, they have to get 48 hours of continuing education, with 12 of those being regulatory for every 3 years. And as they become more experienced, more seasons, around year 9, they can move to a 24 CEU hours, with 12 of those being regulatory. And so that's a condition of maintaining their certification.
So there's one question that is probably on a lot of people's minds. I've seen it on your screen, was security. What's y'all's role in that?
One of the things that we do during our sanitary survey process is we look, as we're surveying all the facilities that a water system has, wells, tanks, treatment plants, et cetera, we are looking to see if there's proper security around that space. So they have a fence. Do they have, is that fence secure? Is it locked? Are the buildings that they have, are they locked? When we walk up and everything's already open, we write that up as a concern that this was already open. We want to see hatches on treatment facilities. We want to see those locked. And so we will issue significant deficiencies for a system's failure to maintain the security around that system. If a tree fell on the fence and compromised the fence, or the part of the fence washed out, we would write that up as a deficiency for the system to take action upon.
And how often is that? Do y'all go out every month, or?
We make annual visits to public water systems, regardless of size. We make those visits annually. We're trying to hire some additional staff. So we might visit a system once every 2 years right now until we are able to get a full team back in place. But ideally, and we have until we hit that deficit of staff, we were inspecting every system in the state annually. And then sanitary surveys, the official, where the deficiencies are issued, pops every three years. And the second and third year are follow-up visits where we walk them through. These are elements you need to keep action on, maintain. We make recommendations during the course of those inspections, and those are supplied back to the system.
And so those records are open to the public
Those records are open to the public if they want to make a request to get them.
Okay. So they have to make a request.
They have to make a request. The system itself, they receive copies of those reports, and the system can supply those reports back to them. We've made it very easy for systems to do that. We have a public water system portal where a multitude of information is available to the system where we receive information from them, but also provide information to them, and all the inspection reports are now available, so they could print them out at will and provide them to the customer when the customer makes a request.
Okay. A few quick questions. I know we're running a little bit over. Do you rate systems like A to B, A to F, or?
We do not do a grade scale. We do a point scale. It's called our capacity assessment program. It's a 0 to 5 scale. It was developed years ago to kind of mirror what the state of Mississippi's, people that live in the state are accustomed to, based on a school rating system. If you've got a level 5 school, then you've got a really good school. And so we kind of mirrored that. And so we have the same idea, 0 to 5. If you have a level 5 system, then your system is doing well. They're taking care of business. If you have a level 1 system, you need to take some action, and that's usually the form of we send technical assistance providers, whether it be Mississippi Rural Water, Communities Unlimited, to help those systems fill in the gaps.
Is that score on the portal?
That score is on the agency's website.
Okay.
It's the capacity assessment program. We do that program annually, and every 3 years we're required by statute to provide a copy of that report to the governor.
Okay.
How many people's in your department? Because you said earlier when you get your team back in place.
Right now, I've got a new engineer starting tomorrow. I need 2 more for the field. And so the required work is still occurring. But to do it at a comfort level where everybody can dedicate the time to do it the way it needs to be done, we need 2 more field people. And so we're also hiring other areas within the compliance branch team. So we have about 21 people right now, and we're going to work our way back up to 30. That includes SRF needs too, the SRF team needs.
So 30 is your comfort zone?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay.
You mentioned, Commissioner Stamps asked the question, and if you said the answer, I apologize, but the question is, how many of our systems are on a moratorium?
I went through that data with fresh eyes this morning before I arrived. I believe the number right now is around 15, with several on that list working towards a solution right now to resolve it.
And most of those is that water pressure issues that keeps them from expanding, or what's the major issue? There may not be a common one, but if there's a common issue, what is it that puts them under moratorium so that they can't expand?
The common issue that happens is usually having lack of adequate capacity to serve the customers, meaning they have a well, for example, they have a well that is only 50 gallons per minute, but they're serving 60 customers, 60 connections. That would be a lack of capacity in order to serve. You do find situations where systems might have, like the example I gave you in Tate County, where they were having corrosion control issues. And so it became corrosion control and capacity for them. And so the solution presented itself to buy from the neighboring system. So it varies based on situations, but most of them stem strictly from not having enough capacity to either treatment capacity or source capacity to provide customers.
See, are y'all working on a system, or do you have a system in place or are you working with MDEQ on the forever chemicals?
Yes, one of the things that has happened is the EPA has issued a rule for PFAS chemicals. It's got five new MCLs. The timeline of implementation where systems have to be fully in compliant is about 4.5 years from now. They released it early this year around April, and so the time is 2 years to assess whether systems have a problem, and then 3 years for a system to take action to do something about it. I would say from the standpoint of being the state is a groundwater state, that has helped us immensely compared to other parts of the country. As the sampling that we've done thus far, we've only identified 2 systems that have PFAS problems.
Are they groundwater systems or surface water?
One of them is a groundwater system, and one of them is a surface water system.
You mentioned we had 3. I know the Tom Big River, the Ross Barnett. What other surface water?
The Tennessee Tom Bigby feeds both the city of Corinth, and it feeds Northeast Mississippi Regional Water Supply, which supplies Tupelo and several other entities like this town of Verona, I think the town of Shannon, and a couple of water associations, smaller water associations in that space, like Brewer Water Association and one from North Lee. And so those They're getting their water from that surface water system. Jackson has 2 plants from the Ross Barnett Reservoir and the Pearl River. And then there's a couple on the coast that are getting out of, I want to say the Pascagoula River. I'd have to go check my memory. But the other system that's groundwater, the source itself is very shallow where they're pulling from. And so when you have a very shallow source, you have the potential of some sort of runoff coming into that space that would percolate down into the aquifer where they're pulling from.
So you mentioned, I know we don't want to get too deep in the weeds on Forever Chemicals, but are they, nationally, are they more, do these surface water filtration systems normally catch those, or is that a new process that may be needed to try to catch those chemicals?
That's an excellent question, Commissioner Brown. For PFAS chemicals, existing treatment doesn't cut it. It has to be, there'll be a significant amount of funding that will be brought into situations where to mitigate that. There's 2 types of treatment that everybody is talking about right now. It's membrane technology, RO, and then they're talking about granular activated carbon. Granular activated carbon is essentially what most of us probably have in our filters inside our fridges to, remove chlorine or something like that. And setting up something like that for a large system is going to be very expensive.
So charcoal gets it out? The charcoal filter?
Granular activated carbon.
The what?
Granulated activated carbon.
Okay. And that's pretty common
It is common, but not
for
on-
households, not for the
Yeah,
the
not
big
on the scale we're
Right,
going to be
right.
talking about here. But the thing is, I would point
So your
to,
Berkey's safe at home.
what I would point to is that the situation in Mississippi is we're in a better situation than other states. Like, for example, Vermont has a very bad problem up there.
Because surface water issues. 'Cause
Well, they have a combination. It's just they've got, I think the industry that was up there contributed to that.
Gotcha, okay.
But either way, their problem is much larger than ours. Ours is right now
Yeah.
pretty small. We hope it stays that way. We're still checking, we're doing monitoring, and the lead up to the rules, requirements, and compliance pieces that we're going to have to do over the next 5 years.
Commissioner Carr, any more questions?
I'm good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. Again, sorry we kept you longer than we should have, but very good information, and I look forward to working with you and your team in the future. And anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick one on the moratoriums. I work with the Public Service Commission in the Southern District, and the questions that we get the most are people who, among the questions we get the most relative to water and not being able to get a will serve, is that when a system tells a customer we're at capacity, they don't give them alternatives. The one thing customers get told is, well, you can help us pay for the new well, or you can help us pay to run that pipe, or whatever it may be, which is not feasible for people that are trying to build homes or renovate their homes. What systems could be put in place so that when someone is told we're at capacity, we can help them be more knowledgeable about what the alternatives are, up to and including bringing them back before the Public Service Commission to look at their certificated area and maybe modify that?
Well, one of the things we try to do for systems is if the moratorium that we issue, they'd already made commitments to those customers. They can write us by letter and list the name of those customers and say, you've already made a commitment to these customers, we'll allow this connection to occur with the understanding you're going to be taking action to resolve it. Usually when we send those moratorium letters out to systems, they immediately touch base with us almost very quickly and say, what can we do? So, well, you need to take steps, get your consulting engineer involved and make a plan to resolve it. There's the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund is out there. There's lots of money associated right now with that. ARPA is kind of locked down at this moment in time. There might be situations for water associations and municipalities where the project they're doing might fix the need that the customer might be encountering to help them get connected. And if solutions are always, consolidation. That's a dirty word with a lot of water systems. Sometimes they don't want to hear that, like to hear that, but consolidation is an opportunity where maybe they divert, say, 30 or so customers that are kind of at the end of the line, and the connection from the neighboring system is maybe right there. I've seen situations like that, I'm sure you have as well, where the switchover can happen within, a matter of days. And they could transfer the customers, or they could work out a situation where until the certificated areas get resolved, they can set a master meter to serve those 20, 30 customers that would be at the end of that space until such time as all the paperwork is resolved. But we try to, if we get into those situations, the water systems usually contact us immediately and say, okay, what can we do? I say, well, you need a plan. Get something going. And, we have financial sources that are available in that process. We can work with them if the system wants to work with us.
Thank you. Good question. For the sake of time, we're going to move on. We'll have another kind of a question and answer session a little later. Mr. Moody, thank you so much for your presentation and for your work to serve the people of Mississippi. Next, we're going to recognize Mississippi Rural Water Association, Kirby Mayfield. Sorry to keep you waiting, Kirby.
No problem.
And I didn't mention that Commissioner Stamps wanted to be here, but he had a previous engagement in Neshoba County. So I know he's probably watching online. So Commissioner Stamps, if you have any questions, let us know. But Kirby, you're recognized. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Commissioners. On behalf of Mississippi Rural Water, its Board of Directors, and members statewide, I do want to thank y'all for putting this on today and for providing us the opportunity to be here. With y'all being new commissioners, I just want to take just a few minutes to kind of tell you about Mississippi Rural Water itself before I get started. There we go. One thing, we are the state's largest water and wastewater utility membership in the state. We have 1,243 total members. The mission of Mississippi Rural Water is to provide leadership, training programs, technical assistance services to meet the needs of our utility members. We provide these services to all rural water associations and small municipalities with a population of 10,000 or less. Mississippi Rural Water is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have no regulatory authority. We get calls all the time in our office, people thinking we have regulatory authority. We do have no regulatory authority. We are basically a training and technical assistance provider. We work closely with all of our state agencies. We'll work closely with the Health Department, DEQ, and PSC, Secretary of State's office, in handling customer complaints and any other matters that may arise. When it comes to emergency response, and Commissioner Carr, I know you had a question about that a while ago, we are the lead organization in responding to emergencies when it comes to water and wastewater. Everybody remembers Katrina. We responded to Katrina, and emergency response back then was a thing that we never really considered. Matter of fact, the week that Katrina hit, we had a training session set up for Florida and Alabama and Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas to meet on the coast for emergency response training. So it all turned out to be hands-on jobs experience doing this emergency response. After Katrina, we realized the need for some type of unified command system to respond to emergencies. So we set up what is called the Water Emergency Assistance Cooperation, better known as RWIC. It is comprised of systems helping systems, neighbors helping neighbors. Out of what we have now does not cost to be a member of RWIC. We highly recommend all of our utilities to be members. By being a member, they are able to get all their paperwork done up front, the mutual aid agreements, and then when an emergency happens, we're ready to respond. Right now, we have 120 members in RWIC. At our disposal, we have 70 generators. These generators are sitting throughout the state, located on systems throughout the state. Our response time from the time we get a call to need of a generator, we are able to have that generator on site within 2 hours up and running. Pretty significant. Among the members, we have 250 volunteers. That's boots on the ground people ready to go to work if we need them during an emergency. Then they also have backhoes, track hoes, excavators, just numerous equipment and supplies to bring with them when they come. This mutual aid agreement, we've worked with the southern states. We have a mutual aid signed with each state: Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas. If anything happens and it's too much that rural water cannot handle within the state, then we can bring them in from other states. We've worked numerous tornadoes. We've worked Louisville, Smithville. Recently, most recent one, bad one, was Rolling Fork. Just to brag on a little bit what we did do for Rolling Fork. When the tornado hit Rolling Fork, we got the call, and I was, me and a staff member was in Winona at 2:30 a.m. that morning with a generator, waiting on them to hook it up. One of my staff was at Rolling Fork at daylight. We did not want to go in until daylight. When he arrived at daylight, he realized there was a problem there. You could smell chlorine throughout the system. And there was nobody there with a hazmat or a self-breathing apparatus container to go in and turn this chlorine off. He used the buddy system, and he went in and turned the chlorine off so the first responders could go in and do the job. So we have worked ice storms throughout the state, as well as we responded to ice storms in Arkansas. When the Jackson water crisis hit, we was the first ones to bring crews in from within the state, as well as Alabama, Florida, and Georgia to help Jackson get up and go. We worked closely with MEMA, Mississippi Department of Health, Public Service during emergencies. At one time, we held the table, ESL 3 table at MEMA, because we realized that as a nonprofit, we was not supposed to hold that seat. So that was transferred to the PSC. So now we work closely with the PSC, with ESL 3. As I said, we have 1,240 members total. Out of these, 984 are voting water and wastewater utilities, which consist of nonprofit rural water associations, municipalities, utility districts, and utility authorities. We have 164 members and 95 individual members. Out of our 984 members, we service approximately 700,000 connections in the state, serving almost a population of 2 million people. Out of this, 471,495 meter connections are served by our Rural Water Association, which is a population of approximately 1.4 million people. All of our rural water associations are nonprofits. They all have a 501c3 status. They all are tax exempt. They are set up very similar to the rural electric cooperatives. They are governed by board of directors, which is elected by the membership. We are regulated by the Mississippi State Department of Health, Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, EPA, Secretary of State's office, and under the Nonprofit Act, and the Mississippi Public Service Commission, whose jurisdiction is limited in accordance to the regs of Mississippi Code 77-3-5. All these rural water systems were started in the late 60s, early 70s. They were started with funds from what was known as Farmers Home Administration, today known as USDA Rural Utility Service. Many of these associations still have debts to USDA at this time. Those who do have the debt also follow under the rules and regulations of the USDA. Mississippi is one of the 3 states in the nation with the largest USDA portfolio for loans and grants in the Board of Waste Department. For those systems that are indebted to USDA, they are federally protected. They are protected under 7 U.S. Code 1926B, which says it was enacted to protect the service area of agency borrowers with outstanding loans from loss of users due to actions or activities of other entities in the service area. Let me stop here and say this. In this, it was found out that the service area for a rural water association is a valued property right. So for the entities in the service area of the agency funded systems, without this protection, other entities could extend service to the users within the service area, and therefore undermine the purpose of the congressional mandated water and waste loan and grant programs, thus jeopardizing the utility's ability to pay back to the agency. We do have a landmark case here in Mississippi. Mr. Jim Herring represented Bear Creek against Madison, Mississippi, and set this as one of the precedent landmark cases that's nationwide.
Mr. Herring, do you represent that case in 1926? Sorry, I had to throw that in there, 1926 case.
I will let that talk a little bit. The bylaws, the water systems are governed by the bylaws, which can only be amended by the members at a call meeting with the members. They also have their own sets of policy procedures. These policy and procedures can be changed by the board and also set out the member and association's responsibility. Then they fall under the Nonprofit Act, Mississippi Nonprofit Act, which protects all parties involved. Under the Mississippi Nonprofit Act, when a system's bylaws does not refer to the problem or the need, you refer to the Mississippi Nonprofit Act. Mississippi Nonprofit Act covers several things. It covers how the board's elected, it covers how to remove boards, it covers areas in such ways that if a customer has filled out a legal petition and presented it to the board for a call meeting of the members and the members fails to call that meeting, then there's ways in the Nonprofit Act those customers can get that meeting called. It also, in the Nonprofit Act, tells what records that our utilities has to provide to the members. And if they fail to provide these records, then it also gives ways that these members can go in and get the records through legal issues. So there's ways to do it through the Nonprofit Act. The monies from the American Rescue Plan for Mississippi totaled $404 million through the 3 rounds. We had round 1, round 2, and round 2A. Out of these $404 million, we were able to fund and help 193 rural water systems. In round 1, which is up and going now, there are 77 new water wells to be drilled in round 1 alone. 27 new elevated tanks to be built. 88 tank rehabilitations to be done. And over 5 million linear feet of water lines to be laid. As of today, they have expended $44 million, has been approved and paid to the contractors. In round 2 in the legislation, there was a little catch there for the systems that wanted to merge and consolidate with other systems to get extra points in the valuation system. We went out and worked with several of these systems and was able to get 14 systems to take advantage of that. Out of those 14 systems, we turned 28 or 29 systems into 14 systems. So we were real proud of that. One of the concerns we are seeing in the water industry is it is predicted that in the next 5 to 10 years, that 50% of our workforce is going to be gone.
50% of what?
50%
Of the workforce?
of the workforce will be gone. We're seeing that in the water industry as well as all other industries. Mississippi Rural Water has started an apprenticeship program in hopes of helping alleviate this situation. I'm going to have Randy Turner to speak on that here in just a few minutes. He is the director of the apprenticeship program. Board training. Back in 1998, the Mississippi State Legislature passed a law requiring all rural water associations, boards, and municipalities serving a population of 2,500 and under to attend one 8-hour class of board training. A few years later, we got that population changed to 10,000. So it's the municipalities with 10,000 or less that has to have board training, and the all rural water systems. Then just 2 years ago, I went back to the legislature. We got another law passed that called for additional training to the ones that get it. First law just said you went one time to board training, got 8 hours, and if you served on the board 30 or 40 years, you did not have to go to it again. So we got that changed because rules and regulations changed, and they need to have additional training. And I used to go in and do the board training, and my staff tells me all the time when these boards come in for training, they don't want to be there that morning. And you can tell they don't. By the end of the day, they are glad they're there. We're having about one board training a month throughout the state, and every one of them is packed. As a matter of fact, Mississippi is only one of the few states in the nation that has this requirement for board training. And we can see where the board training has made a difference. These boards years ago, when they would get on these water association boards, they would see the word nonprofit. I think it was a nonprofit and did not raise the rates. They wanted to keep the rates as low as they can. Since we started this board training, my staff does at least one rate study a week for some systems somewhere in the state. But we've seen these systems starting to raise rates. We've seen some systems with charging as much as $9 and $10 a thousand for water now.
Well, what would that equal on an average customer?
Average
A month.
customer, it'd probably be $40 to $50.
A month?
But these boards now sees the need to make the system viable and sustainable system through this board training. These rural water systems, they are unique in many ways. I get calls all the time, systems want to compare them to their neighboring systems. You cannot compare them to neighboring systems. These system is unique in its own way. And unlike municipalities, the sale of water, I think Bill spoke on that earlier, the sale of water is the only source of income they have. So managing these systems is very crucial. And for most of them, before ARPA comes, the only way they could obtain funding is through loans and grants through USDA or the State Revolving Loan Fund. Talked about complaints earlier. We do work with Public Service Commission, Health Department, DEQ when we get complaints. Dirty water. Bill talked about that, talked about the maximum contaminant level or whenever it would require treatment. But we do see times when these that are below that level still has problems. Just a small, minute amount of iron over many, many years can cause a buildup inside those lines. When you have a line cut or pressure surge, that buildup breaks loose, and of course people get dirty water. Proper training and flushing programs can usually take care of something like that. High water bills, service areas, in the policies, procedures that our systems have, we stress this all the time to the board of directors, make sure you have good policies and procedures. These policies and procedures are there to be sure that how you treat one, you treat everybody else. So we have strongly recommend that they have what's called service extension policies. So if someone comes into their system and buys 40 acres on the backside of 100 acres and wants water to their property. Then they have a policy there that they treat everybody the same. Our systems has different policies. Some of them, they are run it at half cost. They split the cost with the customers. Some of them will say they'll run a 2-inch line, or the customer pays for a 2-inch line, they'll run a 4-inch line. So they several different policies they use there. Get lots of calls about inaccurate meters. I've been in the water business 34 years now. And 9 times out of 10, if you see a meter do anything, it slows down. It does not overread. So we go out and do a meter test when we get these complaints to, satisfy the customers. And usually you find they have a leak. Lots of complaints you hear are chlorine too high, too low. Usually if you get a call and they say they got smelly chlorine, it's too high, that's a sign there's not enough in it. There is the health department does recommend that we maintain a residual of 0.5 free chlorine throughout the system. Then there is a MCL 4 parts per million that we cannot go over. When you run in a system, a city system, a municipality, it's easier to reach this because they may not have the 30 miles of line that they try to keep that free residual in. But when you have a rural system with 120 miles of line, you may have to have it turned up more at the well site to get that residual throughout the system. It talked about the moratorium a while ago, just to brag on what our systems do. This is since 2010. 75 systems was under a moratorium. And just to break it down, there was 31 of rural water systems, which figures to be 0.4%. Municipals, there was 15 of them, which figures to be 0.5%. Then the private owned, there was 29 private owned, which figured to be 24%. Mississippi Rural Water stands ready to work with all of our state agencies and partners in trying to make our water systems sustainable, viable, where they can provide good, clean, safe drinking water. And at this time, I'm going to ask Randy to come up and explain the apprenticeship program to y'all. And after Randy, I'm going to ask Mr. Jim to expound on 1926 B a little further.
Thank you, Kirby. Just want to talk just a moment on the apprenticeship program that we have. In February of 2020, the Department of Labor approved our apprenticeship program for the state of Mississippi. We have a water and a wastewater route that they can go. They can only do one at a time. The program consists of 4,000 OJT hours that's working for a water system. It can consist of 288 hours of classroom time. We teach them pretty much everything that it takes to run a water system. We cover emergency response, O&M, management. We look at construction. Like I said, we try to cover everything. With a grant that we got through DOL, we are in the process and should have that any day now, some virtual reality training. So we're providing the newest and best training that's out there. We will be the only state in the nation right now that's doing VR training for water and wastewater systems. We're really looking forward to that. This new generation has a tendency to learn things electronically a whole lot better than what I did. So moving forward, we think this is a good route to attract new people to our industry. The 50% mark, that study is actually 5 years old at this time, and we are losing people at a rapid rate in our industry. We do not have them coming in quick enough to replace them. The apprenticeship program is helping. Right now, we have approximately 21 active apprentices. We're at the end of our new sign-up period now. The new sign-up period, we've got between 12 and 14, which is great until you go back and look at the number we were talking about a while ago with the number of systems we have in the state, and each one of those have an operator, and half of them ready to retire. So moving forward, we need to get more people in our industry. So please do talk about it. Actually have a few systems in the room here today that have either had an apprentice with them or in the process of getting one now. So, one of the breaks, if y'all got questions about it, I'd be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess you're up, Mr. Herring. I wouldn't insinuate you did the case in 26, but. I'm not calling you that old.
Commissioner, I guess that's,
It's hot, yes.
I want to thank Kirby Mayfield and Randy for the opportunity to join with them in this presentation that they've made. Of course, I've been in this business with them for a good long while, and it's so very pleasing to me, and I am so proud of them and the organization that they have put together. Many years ago, rural water associations they were public utilities, but not really considered to be a real public utility until such time as, in recent years, Kirby and his boards and Randy have made this into a professional operation. Rural water associations now, we want them to be full-fledged public utilities with the full protections. That would include energy and all of the other public utilities, electricity. We want them to be full-fledged public utilities, have the protections, and we also want them to have the responsibilities of being a full-fledged public utility. So that's the way they approach this, and they put their heart into it, and it's just so very pleasing to me to be associated with them in this endeavor. And I want to thank you for you're new, so to speak, to the commission, but you've all had a lot of experience, and appreciate this opportunity to have this educational forum and to put before you some information that hopefully will be helpful to you as you administer your duties. We have, over the years, had great experience with the Public Service Commission and with its staff, its general counsel's office and the public utility staff. It's been our experience that they try to help us. We go to them quite most of the time before we file anything, and to try to get their point of view as to what's feasible, what's in the public interest, and that sort of thing. And so, and Mr. Moody, Bill Moody, of course, all of my experiences with him, he has been one that is trying to help rural water associations fulfill their duties. So we appreciate this forum. So my small role here is to make sure that you understand some of the guidelines under which we operate. Kirby mentioned Title VII USC, United States Code, Section 1926B, which was the landmark decision on that really across the country, was Bear Creek Water Association versus the City of Madison back in the 1980s. What that says is that so long as a rural water association is indebted to rural development, what used to be the Farmers Home Administration, then no governmental body can come in and try to interfere with their operations, which would include eminent domain. They're prohibited from condemnation by eminent domain. Annexation is different, of course, from eminent domain. The city can annex areas that it wants to annex, but that doesn't mean that it takes the certificate of public convenience and necessity that the water associations operate under. For example, with the City of Madison, Bear Creek Water serves 50% of the City of Madison. And that's not unusual across the state. It happens everywhere. Back in the old days, I remember well, in those days, in those early days, 1970s, 1980s, it was thought that a certificate of public convenience and necessity from Public Service Commission really didn't mean anything. After all, a water association, the city that would be serving an area outside of a city City wouldn't want to serve it because it wasn't economically feasible, so the Rural Water Association came into existence. But they didn't pay anything other than the expenses of filing the petition and so forth. So the idea was, in the minds of most municipalities, were that it wasn't worth anything. Well, the series of cases that we have from the Mississippi Supreme Court establish very clearly that the certificate of public convenience and necessity granted by the Public Service Commission is a valuable property right. It's a valuable property right to Entergy to have such a certificate. It's a valuable property right for water associations to have such a certificate. And those certificates are used as collateral when they go to borrow money from rural development or from any other lending institution. And it's a part of the collateral. And that's why you have existing statutes that the commission has, under extreme circumstances, the right to cancel such certificates. But only under extreme circumstances and only after you give the public utility the right to correct it as far as your duty to make sure that you have safe, reliable water and sewer service to the people of this state. So that's a sort of an interpretation there that might be of some help to you. At least that's the way we see it. So eminent domain, we covered annexation. Of course, you understand the language in section 77-3-5. And so rural water associations, nor municipalities, nor public utility districts, their rates are not regulated. And so they are regulated, as far as rural water associations go, they're nonprofit corporations. They have members of those nonprofit corporations. They're not stockholders. When you regulate the rates of, say, Entergy, you're regulating the rates of an organization that is owned by stockholders. As far as the rates of a rural water association, those members hold annual meetings, and if the members are unsatisfied with the governance of the board of directors, well, they have the opportunity, as you know, under their bylaws to remove them. Same thing is true for municipalities. They have elections, and that's the theory behind they regulate their own rates. And so that's the situation. In regard to the moratoriums, you might note that the greatest percentage of rural water associations under moratorium, or that 24%, are those who are for-profit rural water associations, whose rates are regulated by the commission. So sometimes when they come before you for rate increases, well, it becomes an issue. Well, how is that going to, the members have a right to object to that sort of thing. But the great majority, the greatest percentage of moratoriums, as far as rural water associations, are not the nonprofits. They are the rate regulated by the commission itself. So thank you again for the opportunity to make this little presentation for you. And I hope that we want to thank the commission again for the great cooperation we've received from you and your staff over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Do you have a few questions? Kirby, do you mind taking a few?
Be glad to.
Not a lot. Number one, I want to thank you and Tom Abernathy. He's the North Circuit rider, and whenever we have an issue, y'all are very responsive. Y'all help us every time. Y'all do amazing work, and I'll brag on you publicly. You can pay me later. I met Kirby when I was in the House, and we worked together on quite a few issues, and I can enjoy working with you. I respect you, and I respect your team. Y'all do a great job. few questions like, is, obviously, when you have a complaint, we get a complaint, we call y'all. And a lot of times if it's, brown water or low pressure, Tom will generally go out and kind of give technical service and evaluate the issue. And then he tells you, and then we have something to tell the ratepayer of what's going on. If you run into a situation like that and the member refuses to address the issue, what kind of recourse do you have? I know you don't have any authority, but they're voluntary members, but how do you keep some of the system operators making sure that they're providing the service to their customers the way you expect them to and the way we do?
One way we do is through our training that we do. We put on approximately 96 training sessions a year. And we stress to them through these training sessions how important it is that they do their job and do it the way it needs to be done.
And I will say, I'm on rural water. I'm on Wren Water. I was on Coontail before that. But the rural water associations, most of the people always defend the rural water associations because the board members and the people working on the system live on the system. So they have to drink the same water that I drink. Kind of keeps them honest. To Mr. Herring's point, they kind of self-regulate at that point. But in the odd case when you have two rural water systems that butt up against each other, one can't supply, but they have the certificated area, and one can. And the people that want the water or need the service are right across the line. How do you manage those conflicts between the two, or can you?
As far as we're concerned, we can make recommendations and we can suggest to them that they may, they tell this customer, we can get you water, but it's going to cost so much to get it to you through a service extension. And if you can't, then relinquish that part of the territory to the system that can serve. Let them have that customer.
Do you find that most of them work together pretty well?
For pretty much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The what's the smallest system you have?
The smallest
how
system
many
we
rate-
have,
How many connections on the smallest?
40, we got some 40 customers, 35.
Wow.
Right.
As far as when they're trying to evaluate, I know they stand on their own, but when each system is trying to calculate what to charge, do you have a formula that you use, or is there a national formula that kind of, but how many connections per mile that kind of gives them an idea? How do they know how much money they need?
We have a rate study program that we go in and sit down with them. We take the audits, the last year's audit, the amount of water they produced, their debt obligations. We compile it all together. We see what their total cash requirement is. Then we look at how many gallons of water they sold the previous year, and we base that on an average usage, and that gives us our figures of what they need to be charged. And we always recommend that if the total cash requirement is $500,000, that we shoot for a percentage, 10, 15, or 20% profit margin above that.
Gotcha. So that's a formula rate plan, as they say.
Right.
Do a lot of the systems have computer monitored chlorine and other chemicals that treat the water? Are they computer monitored, or are they manuals?
Most of them are manuals. I would say about 40% would be computer monitored, but the rest of them will be manual.
The question came up earlier about cybersecurity, and so obviously that would be a concern if they were computer run, that somebody can manipulate those dosing amounts of those chemicals in the water. And so doesn't sound like that's going to be much of an issue. One thing that you brought up too is that some of your members are overseen by the USDA if they owe them money. What kind of oversight does USDA have on them?
USDA has the oversight to be sure that the customers are being treated fairly. They have oversight on the rates. Of course, they have to approve any rate increases. They have oversight on the bylaws. You know, if they're gonna amend their bylaws, it has to go through USDA before they can be amended. And, you know, USDA does require a yearly audit that these water systems provide to USDA, as well as a quarterly financial statement that they have to provide.
On the systems, like we spoke earlier, we posed the question to Department of Health. If you have water quality that is drinkable, but it's cloud dirty, to use the ratepayers, a lot of what some of our ratepayers report that it's dirty. It's deemed safe to drink, but it doesn't look good. Do you evaluate in the training process of these systems to say, okay, if you want this level of quality, here's the systems that you need and how much it's going to cost? Did they ever come to you for those kind of an analysis?
Very often.
Okay.
I have people like you talked, Tom Abernathy. I have them out in the field seeing these systems every day. And when they make a routine call, or if they go on a complaint that y'all asked us to look into, they do talk to them about what they can do to correct those problems and what's the feasible way to correct those problems.
A lot of times what we see is that the people don't understand how complex the system is. And like you said earlier, or was testified by somebody, if you have a 4-mile long line with 3 houses on it and the treatment plant is further away, it's harder to keep those chlorine levels where they need to be. So I know a lot of our rates, do we compare what your members charge as opposed to other states? And how do we fit in there?
As I said earlier, it is hard to compare rates from system to system. Because so some of them may have a O&M cost way higher, or may have debt obligations way higher. We do have some systems in the state that does not owe USDA, does not owe nobody. So they do not have that debt obligation. So to compare rates of them against one over here with a $5 million debt obligation, you can't do that.
Is there a national average on what?
On what rates is?
Yeah.
No. You know, and I would say the average for our rural water systems in the state of Mississippi, we're seeing the average somewhere now at around $30 to $35 for 2,000 gallons, and probably $8 to $10 a thousand thereafter.
Average household, you would say, would use how many gallons?
About 50. Average household uses about 5,000 gallons.
Okay, it's about $50 a month's average. Okay. Commissioner Carr?
Yes. Thank you, Kirby. So I want to go to the first thing is on your training of your new operators and on your apprenticeship program that y'all working on. Who are y'all working with? Are y'all working with the education system, or is this something y'all have?
It is a apprenticeship program that National Rural Water Association, through our national organization out of Duncan, Oklahoma, started.
So it's a 4-year apprenticeship
It's a
program?
2-year apprenticeship program.
3?
2 years.
2. Okay, and once they come out, do they go take a test to get that certification? Who is that test with?
When they come out of that 2-year apprenticeship program, we like to have them ready to take the test. We like to provide them the material they need that they can take the test when they walk out of that apprenticeship program. Matter of fact, we are letting some of them test while they're in the apprenticeship program.
So that independent testing?
It goes through a testing system.
Okay.
Yes. sir.
Is that in-house? The testing
ABC testing system.
is in-house?
No, they have
Okay.
to go to a testing center here in the state. to
Okay.
get it done. And DEQ, they do it at the short course, at the end of the short course, on the wastewater side.
So they're not registered with the State Board of Contractors?
No.
Okay, I know you said y'all had 1,243 members?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so they're all independent,
Yes,
so
sir.
to speak.
Yes,
So
sir.
do y'all have like a model when someone comes to y'all to start a water utility company? y'all have a model that y'all present to them, and, or is it a suggestion? How does that work?
We will help them and have a model for them, but we do not recommend starting no new systems in the state. We've got plenty of water systems. We've got plenty that they can connect to without having to start another entity. We try to urge them to go talk to their neighboring systems and work something out so they can get water from them.
So now each one of these systems may have a different set of guidelines, so to speak.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does and I know this is a broad question. So when someone comes in to pay their bill, what options do they have? Can they pay by cash? Can they pay by credit card, online? Me being a dinosaur, I want to put the cash on the table. I want to see the person.
That's a broad question. We have some that provides all of it. Online payment, credit card, cash, ever how you want. We do have some systems that's just cash only, cash or check only, you know. So, but we're seeing more and more of them go to the credit card online payment as we go along.
So when a member wants to sit in on a board meeting, is that open to all members?
Board meetings are open to all members of the association.
Okay. So what happens when the board doesn't allow members to come in?
The board should allow members to come in. It is a state law to where if you're a member of that association that you are allowed to attend that meeting. However, you cannot address that board unless you've been put on the agenda to address that board. If you get them that's, well, they're not letting people come in, then they need to give us a call and let us see what we can do about it.
Give you a call. So when that happens, what's your protocol?
I go, me or some of my staff would go meet with that board and let them know, hey, it is state law that you have to let your members in.
Okay.
Unless the board goes into the executive session, and you know they can ask them to leave.
So do y'all encourage, like your websites, you know, each intimate association, utility company, so they have their websites. Is that something y'all participate in, or?
We do encourage our associations to have websites. Matter of fact, we have members that specializes in building websites for rural water associations and small municipalities. They are at our conference every year, and we encourage our system to participate.
Well, Mr. Mayfield, I think, question?
Hi, Mr. Mayfield. Lori Ellen Smith from the Southern District, and we too appreciate all the training you do for your members. It makes a huge difference. Again, on the consumer side, one of the things that I handle specifically are calls from folks who are asked to prepay for a meter when they're building a home, and then it's not installed for weeks and weeks and sometimes months. And you may have addressed this in this manpower discussion. But do we advise them perhaps to ask for a refund? In some cases, these are people that are trying to move a family into a house and never anticipated that it would take weeks to get a meter dropped in. So, and I was curious about that. Likewise, if a meter has to be pulled, like for a bench test or something, they don't always seem to have an inventory of new meters to just drop one in, and then the bench test might take weeks. And again, you might have addressed this in the manpower discussion, I don't know, but we'd like your advice on the best way to advise those complainants.
My first remark to that is, have they asked to meet with the board of directors? Have they went to sit down and meet with the board of directors? That's where you have to start. Go meet with the board of directors, get put on that agenda and ask to meet with them and find out why it's not. If that don't get them nowhere, then give us a call and let us see what we can do about it.
Kirby, quick question. what can we do as a commission to help y'all?
Commissioner, I think we're working very good together, as you stated earlier, and I appreciate the kind words about Tom and our organization. I think it's going great. You know, if we can do anything better to work with y'all, please let us know.
I appreciate your work, and like Commissioner Carr said, we do have some issues to where sometimes rural water associations won't allow the members in or won't give them the financial paperwork that they request. But as we noted, as you noted in your presentation, by law, they have to. And so, you know, we'll keep pushing that issue too, as our ratepayers want more transparency in some of the rural water associations, and I know that's what you want. We'll keep working together to try to make that happen.
Exactly, and like I said, in the Mississippi Nonprofit Act, when they don't provide those records, it's in there how that customer can get those records.
Right.
I got one other question.
Yes, sir.
So on your reports, are they posted in the office of each facility as far as their water quality? And
They do a CCR, Consumer Confidence Report, that each system does every year. And they have to report them, have them at their office. Most of them posted some on our website, though.
okay.
So you do have a spot for that on the website?
Yeah.
Awesome. Any more questions, Mr. Carr?
I'm good.
Commissioner, excuse me. Okay, Kirby,
Thank
thank
y'all.
you. Appreciate you. Good presentation. Okay, we have one more before lunch. Anybody need a break? Good. Take a 5-minute break and come back. That way people can go to the facilities. 5-minute break. Next, we have Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, excuse me, Chris Wells.
Easy for you to say, right?
That's right. You say it fast. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you.
Glad to be here. Appreciate the invitation. In the vein of, and I'm sorry, I'm neurotic, and somebody left a safety pin open on top of this. I'm closing that, because my luck, I would stick my hand down there and it would be sticking out of my palm. I appreciate the invitation to be here. In the vein of educational, I'm starting, I thought what we would do is go back to the basics, and I want to talk a little bit about what DEQ, who we are, what we do. A lot of people don't realize how we're structured. The Mississippi Commission on Environmental Quality is a 7-member board commission appointed by the governor, or governors. They serve 7-year staggered terms. The districts are based on the 1978 congressional districts, and they are the overarching governing body, the Environmental Protection Agency of the state of Mississippi. They promulgate regulations, sit as judge and jury on enforcement cases and so forth. The Environmental Permit Board is a separate body made up of the heads of various state agencies. And they have exclusive jurisdiction to issue, modify, and revoke permits within the jurisdiction of within their jurisdiction, which talk a little bit about that, but basically Title 49 and Title 51 of the Mississippi Code, in accordance with regulations promulgated by the commission. And then the department, of which I'm the executive director, we serve as staff to both the commission and the permit board. And I sit as a non-voting member of the commission. This is our mission statement. Broadly stated, our mission is to protect human health and the environment, balancing environmental protection with responsible economic growth and development. The two are not mutually exclusive. You can have economic development, and protect the environment at the same time. And we'll talk a little bit about a particular issue in that regard here in a few minutes. This is a little bit about how the agency is structured. We have four statutory offices. The first three there are specifically mentioned in the statute. The agency shall be comprised of kind of language. The Office of Pollution Control, which is the largest office and the majority of our employees, and this is where your traditional environmental protection programs, pollution prevention type programs are housed. And most of the authority most of the programs we manage in the Office of Pollution Control, clean water or water pollution, air pollution, waste management, both solid and non-hazardous and hazardous waste. A lot of that is through delegation of authority from EPA. The federal environmental statutes allow states to choose to regulate themselves. Most states do, and you have to seek delegation of that authority. And with that authority comes grant funding to help manage those, administer those programs. And the drinking water program is similar for a health department. And the Office of Geology is also one of our offices. The state geologist is the head of our Office of Geology. This is the State Geological Survey. We do a lot of GIS mapping, geological mapping. We dig a lot of holes. We hunt for fossils. We do a lot of scientific work. And if you follow us on social media, you'll see a lot of our social media posts are related to the work that our geologists do. I wish as a lawyer, I enjoyed the practice of law half as much as our geologists enjoy their rocks and fossils. I would be a much happier person. Anyway. And then the Office of Administrative Services, it's not specifically mentioned in statute, but it does say the executive director may hire an assistant for administrative purposes, some language like that. We established our Office of Administrative Services long ago. The agency's been around since the mid-'80s. That's where legal, HR, accounting, facilities management, that kind of stuff. The back office where the support services are. Without them, the rest of us couldn't do our jobs. We have two smaller offices that are non-statutory. We've created them for various purposes. One is the Office of Community Engagement. This is a very small group that does a whole lot of work. This is where we work with communities, providing information. This is where we deal with environmental justice issues, and we also have the Small Business Environmental Compliance Program, where we actually provide some compliance assistance free of charge to certain businesses that meet criteria. Basically, less than 100 employees, I think, and is the threshold basically, and they can come to us and get confidential compliance assistance. And then the Office of Restoration. We established this office in the wake of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. I am the Oil Pollution Act trustee for the Deepwater Horizon event for the state of Mississippi. I'm the governor's designee on the Restore Council, and which was established under the Restore Act in the wake of the spill, which amended the Clean Water Act to send Clean Water Act penalties that otherwise would have disappeared into the U.S. Treasury. It comes to the states to benefit the states. And we manage the three restoration funding streams that came out of the various litigation against the responsible parties. Criminal fines were placed into a trust fund that the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation is the trustee of. We work with them to fund projects under that Gulf Environmental Benefit Fund. We work through the Restore Council and the Department of Treasury under the Restore Act. And then we work with a group called the Mississippi Trustee Implementation Group, which is made up of me and 4 federal trustees to fund projects funded through the natural resource damages that were recovered. When it's all said and done, we will have administered somewhere between $1.5 and $2 billion in coastal restoration for the state. That up to or somewhere between is because under one of the buckets we're not guaranteed any money. It's competitive. By and large, we have allocations that come to us, and we get a certain amount each year to allocate towards projects, and we're managing currently about $700 million worth of projects in the 3 coastal counties. So that's about 10 people plus some contractors that are doing that work. Very proud of the work that proud of the work that all of them do. This slide is just a sampling. A lot of folks don't know much about DEQ. In the majority of the history of our existence, I think we've been kind of out of sight, out of mind, sort of obscure. Can't say that we don't like that. You know, we're keeping our head down, doing our job. We're staying out of the spotlight, so to speak. That's usually a good thing. I'm trying to change that a little bit. You won't hear me use the word I much. I talk about us and we. I don't do any productive work. I know where the productive work is done. But one thing that I am doing as director is I'm trying to change what we do from a communication standpoint, public relations, and try to get our story out there, the good story, a lot of the work that our staff does. And this is just a sampling of some of the programs that we manage. I mean, we've got our hands in a whole lot of stuff. Again, I mentioned water and air pollution, waste management. Again, those are largely we operate under state law, the Air and Water Pollution Control Law, Mississippi Air and Water Pollution Control Law, Title 49, Chapter 17. The Solid Waste Management Law, Title 17, Chapter 17. And that we have to have those statutes and those legal authorities and staff in order to get that delegation that I referred to. And so the legislature in the I guess late 70s, early 80s, somewhere along in there, passed the statutes that were needed to establish the framework for us to get delegation and have Mississippians regulating Mississippians. And so that's what we do. We do our groundwater assessment and remediation division deals with contaminated sites, assessing and remediating. If you've ever heard of brownfields, that program falls under there. A lot of people have heard of CERCLA or Superfund. That's the kind of work that this group does with contaminated sites around the state, working in conjunction with EPA often. I think I skipped over Land and Water Resources. Oh my goodness. I didn't mention Land and Water Resources. They would be so upset with me because they do a lot of work with you'll hear me say this a lot. They do a lot of work with a few people, right? Land and Water Resources, the Office of Pollution Control deals with prevention of pollution of waters. Land and Water Resources deals with water usage issues. So groundwater withdrawals, surface water withdrawals have to be permitted by us. Well drillers, whether it's a drinking water well or whatever, or irrigation well, or whatever it might be, if it's greater than 4 inches in diameter, I think it's 4 inches, you have to get a permit from us to drill the well. So that's where, and the Land and Water Resources Office manages that, and the dam safety program, which is becoming more and more, or less and less obscure. The older our dams get, the more rain we have. You start seeing news reports about imminent failures of dams, and our dam safety folks are responsible for managing that program, and there's a lot of difficult issues we deal with there. So, but conjunctive surface and groundwater management, when the Office of Land and Water Resources is permitting those water usage situations, the idea is we want to make sure that we are a very water-rich state, surface and groundwater. Our groundwater aquifers tend to recharge relatively easy compared to other parts of the state because of the geology that we have. But it is not an inexhaustible resource. It can be depleted, and it can be depleted in a way that is causes problems from a drinking water standpoint and everything else. And so our job is to make sure that we are managing those water resources, particularly our groundwater resources, in a responsible way. I mentioned dam safety. The Office of Geology, the one regulatory sort of role that they play is mining regulation. So we do a lot of sand and gravel mining. Who knows we have 2 coal mines in the state of Mississippi? A lot of people don't know we have coal. One of them's closing, and I think the other one's gonna eventually close, but, that's a whole nother story. But we have been managing,
Hey, Chris, sorry to interrupt you. Where are they located? For the people, the coal mines?
so one's in northeast Mississippi and the other one's in east Mississippi. Red Hills and, what's the other one? You're testing me, quizzing me.
That's right, sorry, go ahead.
One's in your part of the world and one's over North Meridian.
Nice.
Kemper County, huh? Choctaw. Thank you. So I failed my first quiz, but
Sorry.
that's okay.
Sorry.
I'll
Sorry to
probably fail,
digress.
I'll probably fail some more.
No, you're doing fine.
Geological and GIS mapping, I mentioned that. We do a lot of that work. We are responsible for, we work with MEMA and FEMA on flood mapping. We do the technical work. We don't set insurance rates and all that kind of stuff that flow from the FEMA the flood mapping. We also manage are responsible for managing the Mississippi Digital Earth Model, which is a 7-layer digital model, GIS map of the state. It starts with a ortho imagery. It's like Google Maps when it grows up and really becomes what it wants to be, right? Start with just aerial imaging, and you layer on streets and political boundaries and water resources and it's very complex. It's got a lot of information in there, and you can access that through a website managed by Maris and through our website. But that's a program that we were given the responsibility for in the early 2000s. Statutory responsibility, but no funding. Stop me if you've heard that before. And then I mentioned Deepwater Horizon Restoration, and then the ARPA program, we are managing the municipal and county water infrastructure. MCWI program is the title of ours. And as Bill mentioned earlier, it's for water, wastewater, and stormwater projects. It's a matching grant program established by the legislature. Put up $491 million out of the state's $1.8 billion in ARPA funds, and it's generally a 1-to-1 match. So local entities, whether it's a city or a county, or a public utility not regulated by the PSC, and there's some quirky language in there that we work with the PSC on to make sure we minimize the people falling through the cracks between our program and the health department's program. But at any rate, they bring $1 of their local ARPA funds to the table, and we give them $1 of the state's funds for a water, wastewater, or stormwater program project. We do not generally, beyond this kind of program, the ARPA program, and then we also manage the post-Katrina CDBG water and wastewater infrastructure grant program for the coastal counties. Beyond that, we don't dabble in drinking water. We leave that to our friends at the health department. But because our program was for counties, for political subdivisions, basically, of the state, they lumped it all together, one-stop shopping in terms of the types of projects. And so we had $491 million appropriated to the program. For various reasons, we're going to end up only obligating about $450-ish million of that, but that's still, with the matching funds, that's upwards of $1 billion worth of water-related infrastructure that we're helping to facilitate through that program. And this just touches the surface. There's so many support roles that are played by various folks. For instance, there's a lot packed into water pollution prevention. Permitting is what folks think of as you got to go to DEQ and get a permit, right? We are an important part of the economic development apparatus of the state. When the governor, for instance, stood up during those special sessions back last spring and announced those large economic development incentive packages for the AWS and for the battery plant in Montgomery, where is it?
Marshall County.
I failed my own
Marshall
quiz. When he said that speed to market was one of the major factors for those companies locating in Mississippi, that was code for several things, including environmental permitting, and how quickly we tend to try to get permits turned around. But it's not just permitting. It's compliance. And those permits are written to have limits in them. And those limits are determined by a lot of the scientific support work that our water folks do, where we do ambient monitoring and so forth, ambient water quality monitoring. We do water quality standards and all that kind of stuff that builds up to the permitting. And then once a permit is issued, we've got to make sure we have a compliance and enforcement division, make sure people are complying with their permit. If you write a permit that's designed to be protective of human health and the environment, it's assuming it's complied with. If it's not complied with, then we're not protecting human health and the environment through that permit. So we've got to make sure that people, so that is a necessary part of that. So there's a lot that's packed into some of these things. Some public health specific issues I just wanted to mention. I know this is a water summit, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that ozone and particulate matter attainment are two air-related issues that we're dealing with right now. Under the Clean Air Act, EPA sets ambient air quality standards. The states are responsible for then making sure that our air quality stays in or maintains that air quality or complies with that standard. It's called attainment. When your air quality does not comply with the standard, you're in non-attainment. And non-attainment is the kiss of death for economic development and other things. Not to mention that it means the air is theoretically unhealthy. Now, under the Clean Air Act, though, EPA is required to reevaluate those standards every 5 years. And they have recently significantly lowered the ozone and particulate matter standards. Now, some would argue that those standards that they're setting, the levels that they've set these standards at, are starting to get to background level, starting to get to a point where industrial activity or the regulation of industrial activity may not be able to have any impact. And so we're faced with the potential of being designated as non-attainment, more or less for the first time in our history. We've had a couple of little blips here and there, but by and large, we have always had good clean air and been in compliance with the ambient air quality standards. And a lot of that, one reason for that is a lot of the outreach and education and public engagement work that we do. You'll see Ozone Action Days. If you're not seeing the fossils on our Facebook, Fossil Friday, you might see an Ozone Action Day posted on our Instagram or X. That's an opportunity. That's us notifying the public that there's a potential air quality issue, and there are things that the public can do to help that. Wait till late evening to mow your grass. Something simple as that. Carpooling where you can. Those kinds of things, because that's what affects ozone. We're working with our regulated industry right now in a similar way on the particulate matter. We've got a couple of particular areas of the state that are at risk of becoming non-attainment, but there are some things, voluntary things, that those industries in those areas can do that will help ensure that they have the ability to continue operating, expand, and additional industry come in at a later date, which non-attainment, if we're designated non-attainment, that shuts down. We're responsible for water quality, particularly surface water quality in general, but also groundwater from a pollution standpoint. This is different from drinking water. Drinking water standards do not apply to lakes and streams. The law doesn't require that we ensure that you can go scoop out a cup out of the reservoir and drink it and have no risk of drinking goose poop, depending on where you scoop that water out. The law does require that we do everything we can to ensure that our surface waters comply with water quality standards from a Clean Water Act standard, not a drinking water standard. And so that's what a lot of our work there is related to. But we do have a little bit of a role when it comes to drinking source water protection. Now again, Most of our drinking water, as Bill mentioned earlier, most of the drinking water in the state of Mississippi is groundwater sourced, not surface water sourced. But all of it goes through treatment. When it goes through treatment, before it goes in, is put out into the system to be consumed, right? But the more polluted, the dirtier that water, that source water is, the higher the cost of that drinking water treatment and so forth. So we certainly want to make sure that we protect the water quality, not just from a just general, be able to fish and swim in it, but also to help with ensure safe drinking water. From a groundwater standpoint, where the work that we do there is largely centered in the Delta, and it has to do, we do some sampling, periodic sampling to ensure that we're not having agricultural contamination of aquifers with pesticides and herbicides. And then PFAS has been mentioned. I was a little surprised that it took as long as it did this morning for PFAS to come up for the first time. That's one of the elephants in the room. EPA has developed an MCL, applies to drinking water. They have not finalized anything on our end of the shop. There's no remediation standards. There's no cleanup standards. There's very little out there in terms of treatment and disposal. Bill mentioned activated carbon. Reverse osmosis is another treatment mechanism that's been proven to be effective. One thing that EPA can't seem to answer is you put a GAC system, it's one of the worst acronyms ever, but a granulated activated carbon, the cool kids call it GAC. You put one of those systems in, you filter the water, you take that very dilute, very low levels of PFAS, and we're talking parts per trillion is the health advisory numbers that they're throwing out there, and I forget what the MCL is, but very, very small amounts. You concentrate it into this pile of carbon. What do you do then? What do you do with that granulated carbon now that it's loaded down with PFAS? I have personally asked that question of EPA, and I just get hem-haws and changing subject. The point I'm making there is PFAS is something we've got to get our hands around. We've got to address it. We've got to find ways to deal with it. But EPA is taking steps. They've got their roadmap and they're working through steps. But they have, I think, in some ways, and I'm saying this publicly because I think it's true, they've gotten out over their skis a little bit. For instance, they've designated PFAS as a hazardous substance for CERCLA purposes. That gives authority to have people clean up sites that are contaminated with PFAS. That's a good thing. The bad thing is they can't tell you how much to clean it up, what standard to clean it up to. It's all going to come, and I guess part of my point there is there's a lot that we as a society, we as a nation, we as a state have got to deal with. There's a lot of things we've got to get in line before we are ever really able to address the PFAS issue. I don't want anybody to think that I'm minimizing PFAS or the risk of it or belittling the whole issue. I'm not at all. I'm simply saying that it is a huge elephant. It is the elephant that has eaten all the other elephants, and now we've got to eat it, and it's going to take us a while. All right, enough about PFAS. I'm sure I'll get hit in the face with something in a minute, but I did want to mention one particular issue that we're dealing with right now. A U.S. Supreme Court case came out last year, the Sackett case. It's actually not the first opinion that the U.S. Supreme Court has issued in the same case. The Sacketts were some rich folks, apparently, because they had plenty of money to fight all the way to the Supreme Court fight EPA all the way up to the Supreme Court more than once. But the most recent Sackett case deals with the definition of waters of the U.S. for purposes of Clean Water Act jurisdiction. Now, I'm trying not to get too law professory, but I think it's important to understand, lay the groundwork real quick. The Clean Water Act is a federal statute. I mentioned the Mississippi Air and Water Pollution Control Law is our state law. The Clean Water Act is a federal statute. It tells EPA what EPA's jurisdiction is, EPA and the Corps of Engineers. Their limit of jurisdiction is established by the Clean Water Act. And it says, thou shalt not discharge a pollutant into a water of the U.S. from a point source. Paraphrase. Into a water of the U.S. And it then very unhelpfully defines waters of the U.S. to mean traditionally navigable waters in the territorial seas, or something along those lines. And so there's a lot of vagueness in the statute, and for decades, they've been struggling with what constitutes a water of the U.S. for purposes of jurisdiction of the Corps of Engineers and EPA under the Clean Water Act. And where this really hits the ground, where a lot of the litigation, particularly the Sackett case, is in wetlands, dredging and filling of wetlands. You've heard of wetlands regulation, may have heard of 404 permits from the Corps. That's what we're talking about here. It applies to more than just wetlands. But that's where the litigation has come in. What constitutes a water of the U.S.? And you can, this flow chart here is just to give you an idea that they've been struggling with it for years and years, and back and forth. And every time the Supreme Court would try to rein the agencies in a little bit, they would push the envelope. And then the Sackett case came along, and supposedly definitively said what a water of the U.S. is. And it basically says, it would basically mean named streams and immediately adjacent wetlands. Now, the federal agencies are already testing that, right? But meanwhile, we have had since the 1960s, really even predating the Air and Water Pollution Control Law, we have had a state definition of waters of the state of Mississippi. This is how the legislature defined the water resources that we as the state of Mississippi want to protect from a water pollution standpoint. Title 49, Chapter 17, Mississippi DEQ. I'm not talking about waters of the state for any other purpose other than for purposes of Title 49 and our jurisdiction. And the question is, what is there to discuss? And we've been having conversations, stakeholder engagement, and with legislators and others, other political leaders, and including commissioners here in the room today. But the question is, what does the state of Mississippi, what does that waters of the state really mean? It's on paper, it's much broader and always has been much broader than the definition of waters of the U.S. Meaning, whatever the feds are going to do at the federal level, there's something where the legislature of the state of Mississippi has said, DEQ, we want you regulating in this realm. Now, and so what I've asked people to do, think of waters for purposes of pollution regulation, again, as a spectrum or a continuum. And we put together these maps. Nothing definitive here. This is, I cannot overemphasize that there's nothing official about this. This is no statewide delineation of wetlands or anything like that. It's just an illustration, and I can't overemphasize that. Just an illustration. But we took some GIS data layers, soil types, distances from name stream, this, that, and the other. And the map that you see on the left is an illustration of what the extent of federal jurisdiction looked like, what the state of Mississippi looked like if the way EPA and the Corps has regulated for 40 some odd years. It's a lot of blue and green. We're a very water-rich state. As a practical matter, they have taken such an expansive view of their own jurisdiction traditionally that we did not regulate beyond, if they regulated it, we did. You had to have a 404 permit, you had to have a 401 from us, a 401 water quality certification from us. You had to have construction stormwater from us, and we protected, because they took a very expansive view of their own jurisdiction. That's pre-Sackett. Now, if you take Sackett on its face, the language of the opinion, you would get a map that looks like the map on the right, which is basically the named streams and immediately adjacent wetlands. And what I have said is that to limit our jurisdiction to the what's on the right there would be a mistake. We're all outdoors people, Mississippians. We traditionally are. We like our hunting and our fishing and our kayaking and our bird watching and all those outdoor activities, right? Cycling and all those things. The Clean Water Act was never, arguably, was never intended to regulate everything that you see on the left. And the definition of waters of the U.S. has always been much narrower than what you see on the left. But the definition of water of the state is not as narrow as what you see on the right. Somewhere in there, in between, is some reasonable place for us to land. And if you think of it as a spectrum that way, that somewhere along this spectrum, so this continuum, there is a place where the legislature, the policy of the state of Mississippi is, we're going to protect our water resources. And we've defined water resources, as you saw earlier in that definition, that's very broad. So what we've been doing since the SAC opinion came out, and we actually started working on it even earlier than that, is taking our existing regulatory definition, which is just a regurgitation of the statutory definition, and try to figure out what kind of meat we need to put on the bones of that statute. The statute, if you think of the statute as a skeletal definition, and we want to flesh it out through our regulation. And so that's what we've been working on. We've been looking at doing some work on evaluating what the various terms in the definition mean. As is often the case, the legislative branch, they pass a statute that is somewhat skeletal, and they leave it to regulatory agencies, depending on pre or post Chevron, may or may not have how much discretion the agencies have, but they've left it to us to flesh out where it's ambiguous. And there are some terms in our statute that are a little ambiguous. For instance, it says that a wholly landlocked and privately owned water body is not a water of the state. What does wholly landlocked and privately owned mean? If you share a pond with your neighbor, you both are private citizens, that's privately owned, but what you do on your side of the pond can affect your neighbor. So what did they really mean by that? And so we've been looking at these kinds of things. We've taken a stab at what a regulatory definition might look like. We've been doing and will continue to do additional stakeholder engagement. The legislature took up the issue this past spring. There were at least 2 bills introduced, and neither one of them passed, which was a signal to me that they wanted to see how this process plays out before they act. And so we continue this work. We're engaging with various stakeholders. We're going to be having some stakeholder meetings. We're going to be having some public meetings, eventually with the idea of publishing a regulation. We have not proposed a regulation at this point. We've not made any final decisions. And in fact, the stakeholder meetings that we had, some stakeholder meetings last September, and we got some really good feedback that actually changed our thinking a little bit in the course that we're taking. And so we're still sorting through all of that. But this is the kind of thing we're talking about. Where do we want to draw the line? Or where did the legislature intend the line to be drawn? Named streams, reservoirs, lakes, and the big, permanently flowing things, those are clearly, the Mississippi River, the Pearl River, the Pascagoula River, those things that are traditionally navigable, those are waters of the U.S., always have been, always will be, and waters of the state. But what about an intermittent stream? It's got a defined bank, and when it rains, water flows through it, but it's not flowing it all the time. It's not permanent. It's intermittent. What about ephemeral features? Less defined banks, less natural. Then you've got other types of waters like wet pine savannas on the coast. Now, we don't do flooding. We don't regulate flooding. But if you go down there and pave over all of the wet pine savannas on the coast, you're going to have flooding. Sloughs in the delta. So the idea, again, we want to protect people's fishing holes, duck sloughs, kayaking streams, some of which would not be protected under the Clean Water Act, no longer protected under the Clean Water Act, post-Sackett. So there's something there for us to do. And this is just an example of one thing that we're struggling with. This is a local, this is the Ross Barnett Reservoir, and you'll see these four numbered spots. They're, on the next slide, these are photos taken at each one of those spots. And this is essentially the same, quote-unquote, water body, if you will. And it's an illustration of how difficult this question can be in practice. Because on the Ridgeland side, it starts out as just a grassy swale roadside ditch. Now, the Ridgeland city of Ridgeland, the Madison County supervisors, they don't want to have to come to DEQ and get a permit to do routine drainage maintenance of that roadside ditch. I don't want them to have to come get a permit from DEQ. We couldn't manage that. Practically speaking, it can't work. But we do want to protect that in some way, because if somebody pours methyl ethyl death in that roadside ditch, it's going to run downstream. And as you get close, as you go downstream, as you get closer and closer going east toward the Pearl River, you see how it changes. And what started out as a grassy swale ends up looking like this. Number 5 here is it's a natural looking. There's cypresses and whatever else in it. And it's a natural water body that empties directly into the Pearl River. So we don't want, this whole thing may need to be protected on some level, but there may be some things that we aren't as worried about. So it comes down to a question of what do we want to, we've defined, we being the legislature, we being the state of Mississippi, have defined the resource very broadly. Now the question is, what do we want to protect that resource from, and what mechanism do we want to use to protect it? And those are the kinds of conversations that we're having now. And these some of the questions that where we stand. I mentioned some of this. We're looking at working on some regulatory language for a discussion, and we're going to be doing a lot of additional outreach and education. I think I've said everything on that slide, one form or another. So, with that, glad to answer any questions that I.
Great. Thank you for your presentation. It's very thorough. Just a few quick questions. How many aquifers do we have?
Well, first of all, I'm not a geologist, just that caveat. We have a bunch of them, and they overlap, so that there's different types of aquifers at different depths. Shallow aquifers tend not to be used for drinking water or any other source or any other reason. Some of your shallow aquifers, your mid-level aquifers, like the Mississippi alluvial aquifer up in the Delta, is used for irrigation, but not for drinking water. But
so there is a differentiation.
I don't know what the number is, but there are aquifers that cover multiple states.
So there is a differentiation between, because we see some agricultural use of water, and the concern is from a lot of people around us, well, that's the same, pulling out of the same aquifer, but that's not necessarily.
Generally speaking, that's not the case. Those aquifers that are used for agricultural irrigation generally are in a shallower aquifer than the drinking water. Now, with that said, some of those shallower aquifers, they've begun to be drawdown. We've gone from, as a map that I didn't have in there, we have an interactive map that shows over time from the 60s to now how many permitted wells we have, and the Delta is covered with dots because there's so many irrigation wells, thousands of them, a couple of thousand of them. And that wasn't the case 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And so it's the more holes we poke in an aquifer, the more straws in the cup, right? And so the level is going down. Doesn't mean we've depleted them, but it's something that's got to be managed. And as that happens, people tend to drill deeper and deeper holes to try to get to water if their well runs dry. But to my knowledge, none of those. There's not an overlap between irrigation wells and drinking water wells.
That's the follow-up. And so most of our drinking aquifers, are they stable or are they being depleted?
I can get you a better answer to that question if I can talk with our land and water folks, but I would say that the best way I can answer that is, over time, we have drilled more and more, we put more and more straws into those cups, and just, they do recharge, but at some point, demand can exceed supply. But right now, we don't have any any aquifers that we've declared to be, I think the term under the statute is mined. Statute tells us to avoid mining the aquifers, and we've not declared any of them to have been mined.
Do you know, y'all do the permitting, do you know how many residential wells we have? Like just single household or two or three?
I don't think we have data on that, because a lot of those wells don't require permits from us. There's a threshold, I think it's either 4 or 6 inches. If it's smaller than that, you don't have to have a permit from us. And so most of these, especially individual household residential wells, aren't regulated from that standpoint. They don't have to get a permit from us.
Gotcha. The overall quality of our aquifers, obviously, the Department of Health testified or mentioned that most of our water that we consume is from the aquifers and not from surface waters. So aquifer quality, good, above average?
Yes, I think Bill said it best. It's one of the reasons we use so much groundwater in the state of Mississippi is because it's so consistent. Now, there are certain areas of the state, the coast, for instance, groundwater, certainly shallower groundwater tends to be high in arsenic. In the Delta, it tends to be high in iron. So just a quick anecdote, I can remember, I grew up in Rankin County, but I hunt in the Delta, right? And I can remember the first time I ever saw a groundwater well being used to flood a soybean field for duck hunting. And after a couple of weeks of running, the little ditch that it was running through turned reddish orange. As a kid, I didn't know what that was. I know now it's because of the iron content in that water. But by and large, it's, our groundwater is very clean.
I grew up in rural North Mississippi, and we had well water. Of course, we drank it, but it didn't smell so good, and it did leave those red stains on the bathtub, so we probably shouldn't have been drinking that, maybe. I don't know.
I'll leave that for my friends at the health department to answer.
But anyway, I went from well water to community water. But with the economic development, obviously that's a very important part of driving the economy in the state. As one legislator called me and asked me this question, is there any concern about, her specific case was the battery plant in Marshall County. Is there any concern about using too much water, or that was just a question that was posed to me?
The answer is we don't have any significant concerns right now. There is, we need to do more. Well, let me back up. We do routine groundwater level monitoring throughout the state. And we have a group of folks that's what they do. They go around the state and measure levels. They have monitoring wells, and they measure the levels and how they fluctuate. And we are a water-rich state. Now, there are a couple areas of the state. The Delta is the prime example. We've been doing a lot of work. There's a task force, the Delta Water Task Force, that we lead. It started out as an informal task force, and Governor Bryant ended up formalizing it through an executive order that stands to this day. And the charge of that task force is to explore options for reducing the burden on the aquifers in the Delta from agricultural use, and to ensure the longevity. So there's a lot of work going on there, and we do have some concerns about water levels in the Delta. There's a couple other parts of the state, the Jackson metro area, the populous areas where we need to do more study. We don't have as much information as we would like, but we don't have any information that I'm aware of that gives us any particular concern at this point about any aquifers from a level standpoint, other than the delta.
And just to follow up, so somebody that builds a house and wants to dig a well, there's really no permitting or nobody regulates that.
I won't say nobody regulates it. I can just speak for the fact that if it's under that threshold size, casing, diameter, that they don't have to have a permit from us.
Commissioner Carr?
To answer that question, does the health department get involved before that person can move in and get the quality of the water in a testing laboratory?
I would have to defer to the health department on that.
As far as air quality, can you give us some examples of where y'all doing testing as far as air quality?
So we have permanent air quality monitoring stations throughout the state that all meet EPA siting criteria. And we monitor for various air pollutants. One of the most comprehensive air quality monitoring station that we have is in Pascagoula, close to the Singing River Hospital. And I say it's comprehensive in the sense that there are 6 what they call criteria pollutants under the Clean Air Act, and I think we monitor for all 6 of them at that station. We don't necessarily monitor for all 6 pollutants at all of the monitoring stations because of depending on the geographically where they're located in the industry nearby and that sort of thing. So we monitor all around the state. And that is, most of those are continuous monitors. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. And also on your, like where trash and garbage pits are at, do y'all check those numbers as far as water quality and air quality around them?
Around landfills?
Yes.
So landfills have various permits that they have to have from us. And those permits require them to manage the leachate from the landfill. Depending on the type of landfill, groundwater monitoring can be required. Your municipal solid waste landfills, I think, all require groundwater monitoring, I believe. And air quality, there's air quality requirements in those permits also. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to continuously monitor air emissions, so to speak, but they have to have controls in place to address methane and other air emissions that come from landfills, and then they have to monitor periodically. Anybody that has a water discharge permit or an air emission permit from us has a requirement to monitor periodically. It may be weekly, it may be monthly, it may be semi-annually or annually or all of the above. And then they have to report the results. They have to have those samples analyzed at a lab, and then they report those results to us and the public through either a discharge monitoring report or an air emissions report. And that's part of our compliance and enforcement program.
How involved are y'all gonna be on the carbon capture?
So one of our little niche programs is the underground injection, UIC program. There are several classes of wells. I believe it was 2 years ago, the legislature passed amended the statute that deals with title, I think it's not title, but type 6 or class 6 wells. I think it's class 6 that carbon sequestration falls under, and moved the jurisdiction from DEQ to the Oil and Gas Board.
Okay.
So that's a long-winded way of answering your question, but the point there is that there are different kinds of things that involve the injection of pollutants or waste or whatever, and the Safe Drinking Water Act allows that. But there is a delineation. There's several different statutory lines drawn in terms of jurisdiction where DEQ and the Oil and Gas Board have potential overlap, and over time the legislature has tried to draw clear lines so that people aren't double regulated, so to speak. And that's one of those where we at one time had that jurisdiction, and it was moved to the Oil and Gas Board.
So How many staff do you have working with you?
What's today?
And how short are you?
So we currently have about, I think the last number I saw last week was 354. That is on payroll, people at desks kind of thing. We were appropriated 377 total pins this past session. I believe, it is my belief, my firm belief, that at 350-ish people, we are understaffed. I believe that at 377, we would be understaffed. And understaffed from the standpoint of most effectively and most efficiently doing our job. And that's, and not to say that we aren't, quote unquote, getting the job done now with 350 people, 50-ish people, but we're not as effective, not as efficient as we could be. I worry that things are slipping through the cracks. Our permit turnaround times are not where we or the regulated community or the legislature or nobody likes it. We're taking, in certain types of permits in particular, it takes us longer than we would like. Construction stormwater is one of those, one of the prime ones. We do a really good job overall. Again, it's a point of it's a selling point for the state of Mississippi from an economic development standpoint. MDA and recruiting businesses, they're able to tout our speed to market, and that being part of that being our permit turnaround time. But we are falling short of where we want to be there. We want to be. We don't want to be the bottleneck. All that's to say, when I took over as executive director, January 1st of 2020, we had 397 employees. We have 352 or 4 today. That has stabilized over the last couple of years, but we're 40 some odd fewer employees than we were 4.5 years ago. Now, do I need 397, 399, 387? I don't know exactly what the number is, but I feel like it's more than what I've got to really do things the way they need to be done. So that's, again, a long-winded way of answering your question, but.
Just to follow up on Commissioner Carr's question, so any carbon capture in the future is predominantly being administered by the Oil and Gas Board?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And last question, you mentioned the waters of the U.S. Is that an EPA rule or congressional statute?
So the water of the U.S. definition is in the Clean Water Act itself. It's congressional. The agencies have a regulatory definition of waters of the U.S. In fact, they did something they've never done before in the wake of Sackett. I don't think they've ever done this before. They went straight to a final rule. They did no public notice and comment because they said that the Supreme Court had directed them to what their statutory or what their regulatory definition should be. So there is a regulatory definition out there that supposedly tracks the Sackett opinion. And I say it all that way because all 3 branches of government have their hand in that issue. Gotcha. But all the more reason why we feel like we need to figure out what it is we're going to do as the state of Mississippi. Where do we want to draw the line? What I have told folks is I want to get to a point where the feds are going to do what the feds are going to do, but we have clarity and certainty as to what the regulatory requirements are for the state of Mississippi, how we're going to protect our resource as we define it. There are some states, and it's red, blue, and purple states that have actually passed statutes that tell their environmental regulatory agency sets their jurisdiction coextensive with waters of the U.S. under the Clean Water Act. I personally believe that's as a conservationist myself, an outdoors person, I think that would be a mistake for us to do that. And I believe that that's the general consensus in the legislature also. I hope it is.
Not to belabor the point, I know we're short on time and overtime actually, but the second case is already been decided?
That's correct. May of 2023 is when they handed it.
So, well, Chevron deference may or may not play a role in stuff like that.
In that particular case, it shouldn't because the way the agencies did their regulation.
Gotcha. Okay, we're short of time, so we're gonna break for lunch, and then, I know it's gonna be difficult, but any of the presenters, if you can stay around for the Q&A, we're gonna make the evening pretty fast. We have, Mississippi, Municipal Water that's gonna be here, and, Mayor Spruill and Edward Kemp's gonna present. But I know there's a few questions that we'll have, especially from rural water and DEQ. I think Department of Health slipped out, but maybe we can get them back. But just a few questions at the end. We're going to try to get Mississippi Municipal Water, and then we'll go to Q&A, and then we'll end up the meeting. So it looks like we should be done a little earlier than what it shows on the schedule. So thank y'all so much. We'll break for lunch and see y'all when you get back. And thank you for your presentation. Mayor, you want to be recognized? You want to recognize Ed first? There you go. Fair enough. Sounds good. Make it good now.
Well, it's been a pretty tough group to follow. It's been really great so far. I just first want to thank you guys for putting this on and commend you for starting the conversation. And I think it's good to have everybody together around the table, around the figurative table, and just discussing issues and how we can really work together. And thank you for your representation of us up in the Northern District, and thank you both for your service. I do want to introduce our mayor in just a second, but first I wanted to kind of give just an overview of our system, kind of what we do, and then the mayor's going to talk about some of the common issues and things that she hears, but I think it'd be better to understand a little bit about our system because it plays into kind of what our residents and customers see on a daily basis, if that's okay. First of all, can we pull up that presentation?
You go by Ed or Edward?
Either one.
Okay.
I promise I've been called much worse. Edward's fine.
Okay.
Right. So we are Starkville Utilities, and I'll just address the commission if that's okay, but certainly can take questions from the audience. We are a multi-service utility in Starkville, Mississippi. We are a department of the city of Starkville. We are governed by our mayor and board. We provide water, wastewater, and electric service to a different subset of customers, and I'll show those maps in just a second. We also do the billing and collection for all the sanitation and garbage collection for the city. So generally, we're going to have between 60 and 65,000 points of connection or points of service throughout our community. This is our mission statement, something we strive to do on a daily basis, safe first and foremost in everything that we do. We want to make sure we're following our permit guidelines and providing safe utility services to our community. Obviously, cost is always on everybody's mind, and we try to drive that cost as low as we can. We'll talk a little bit about some of those challenges and issues. And then reliability. We want when people need it and when they turn the faucet or turn the light switch on for it to function. And that's the expectation of our customers, and we certainly try to do it. And do all of that in the realm of excellent customer service and trying to meet the expectations of our customers. Again, we'll talk about that, and especially in a college town of what that looks like. Let me also mention too, I appreciated the comments earlier from Mississippi Rural Water Association. We are actually an affiliate member of that organization. They do great training and great advocacy on the statewide level. We do not have that on the municipal side right now. I was talking with Robbie with MML a little bit earlier, and there's not a utility municipal group per se. So what we're talking about today is really from the city of Starkville's utility perspective, and we do have a lot of close working relationships with the other municipal providers, specifically in North Mississippi. So some of the things that you'll hear today are common themes or common issues, but there is no, I guess, Mississippi municipal utility group right now that I can kind of represent on that. So this is our superintending authority, our mayor and board. We do not have a utility board. Some utility organizations do in municipals. There's obviously pros and cons to each of those, and as y'all know, our mayor and board are elected every 4-year terms. So these are our regulating entities and agencies to add to the complexity with it being a multi-service utility. You've heard from 2 of these already today, but of course, our water and sewer rates are set by our mayor and board. We do have some areas outside of our city limits, beyond that threshold that the Public Service Commission would have a voice in that as well. On the electric side, we are a TVA in the TVA footprint, so they are a regulator for everything electric related, including rates. Drinking water, of course, Department of Health. We have a good working relationship with them, as well as DEQ on the wastewater side. So lots of different folks to collaborate with, and lots of different permit requirements to achieve. So I wanted to go through each of our services quickly, because really what I want to show today is about a given customer in the city limits or in our service territory, and how there is quite a bit of confusion, and which leads to frustration that we experience a little bit every day. So this is our system. You can see in the city limit boundary is indicated in red, and then the water area, as you can see there, we serve over 16,000 customers. We do have two former water associations that in the past the city has acquired, one to the southwest, which is the old Bluefield Water Association, and then to the northeast, which is the old West Point Road Water Association. And there's some some case studies on that, and happy to share more dialogue about that and lessons learned if you prefer. But this is just some of the points of interest about that particular system. This is our wastewater or sewer boundary. There is a wastewater authority, our wastewater district to our east, that extends into that city limit area there and extends into the parts of Oktibbeha County as well. Have a few more sewer customers there. And then this is our electric footprint, which is the smallest of the three. Obviously, like I said earlier, fully by our bulk wholesale power from TVA. So then when you put them all three together, this is what our footprints look like. And as you can see, they're all different. None of them coincide with our city limits. Some extend outside, some don't even extend to the boundaries. So this is a challenge for us to communicate to our customers. We get this request quite a bit, and we have, we've started trying to put this on our website and try to provide more explanation to our customers. So this is just within our responsibility and within the city, and this is what it looks like outside of our particular boundary. This is just the water, since today we're focused mainly on drinking water. And you can see the number of surrounding water associations in our county, and even in our city limit, we have 3 water associations that serve city residents. Okay. So then we talked a little bit about rates earlier, just to give you a data point. These are what our current rates are. We are going through a current rate study that is going to likely recommend to our board an increase, primarily due to capital improvement and to O&M expenses. And I will say from the jump here too, that our mayor and board have been incredibly supportive of utilities in the city of Starkville. They understand the value of them. They understand the importance in the community. They understand the value of investment and what it means to have a long view. And so I really commend them. I would say in the city, we have complete alignment on rates and making sure that the rates match what is needed from an investment standpoint and from a maintenance of a high-quality, high-level operation.
Just for clarification for folks watching, what's the difference between base and variable?
Yeah, base rate is going to be what we consider a minimum bill. It's in our particular case, it includes the first 1,000 gallons. It is almost the cost of the infrastructure to bring that water service to you. And then beyond that 1,000 gallons, there's a variable rate which kicks in after that 1,000 gallons, and you pay that $4.50 for every 1,000 gallons thereafter.
So I think Kirby mentioned that about 5,000 gallons is average. So most people in Starkville, $36, $34, $3.
Yeah. For 5,000 gallons, that's we're seeing a good bit of customers with a usage less than that. So their average bill is somewhere in the $20, $25 range. So I'm going to now turn it over to our mayor, who's joined us today. She is in her second term and has a long distinguished career before being an elected official, and I think it's going to provide some good perspective from her standpoint.
Good to have you with us, Mayor.
Thank
Welcome.
you so much. I appreciate it, and I appreciate y'all's service. It matters truly to us. It matters to the our community as well as to the state. So thank you both for doing this and for holding this forum. My understanding is that this is the first time you've done this. So I think that's great. I will look forward to more of them. And I'm sorry I missed the front half because Edward has taken copious notes, so he'll be briefing me later on.
He had ink going everywhere.
Yeah, well, I think it's great, and I really do. It's important to have that public feedback. So I will kind of give you the sense of, I think Edward touched on it. One of the things that I'm here to express is the significance of the the water treatment facility to us and to our community, and the need for our residents to understand where that water is coming from. And a lot of times there's confusion associated with that because we do have 3 water associations that are inside our city limits. Recently we acquired one because we just annexed a couple of years ago, so we have an additional 3rd now. But prior to that, we also experienced it with when they have a break, they will call us and not call their service provider. And so it does become one of those things that you're addressing on a fairly regular basis. But I don't want to come here to do anything other than say I believe in the water associations. They have served an enormous purpose over the years. But I do think there comes a time when you recognize that they may not be necessarily the best way to go forward in a community like the city of Starkville that's growing, where we are able to provide 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365 service to the water associations. And I think it's notable that the 2 water associations that came to us and asked us to take them on, Bluefield Water Association, again, to our west, and then to the northeast, the Old West Point Road Water Association wanted us to come take them on because they knew that we could do a better job, and only in the sense that it's almost like a volunteer fire department, right? They just don't have the professional and the daily routine of servicing and having the staff on call. So I think it matters, and again, rural water associations absolutely serve a purpose in areas that have only that option. But when you have a municipality that's able to provide those more in-depth services, those more robust services, I think it's important that we do that and that we offer that, and it's something that can be looked at from a legislative standpoint to combine those or to allow us to serve those that then are able to receive services from our municipality or a municipality. I can't imagine Starkville is the only one with that kind of issue going forward. I feel sure that, in fact, I think is there a PowerPoint thing? You were good at that. Here, play with it, please.
Edward, you got that part.
Yeah, he's got that. But anyway, I'm trying to make sure that I don't leave you feeling as though I'm saying anything other than an appreciation of water associations, but at some point in time they have outlived necessarily their usefulness just because they are not able to do the kinds of things that I think that we can do. So I mentioned the confusion and the feedback from residents, which we get on the regular, and the responsiveness and accountability of a municipal water system. I mean, I'm gonna probably lose votes or maybe gain votes over how well we provide our infrastructure, our water infrastructure. So I think we are highly accountable. I've had complaints from some water associations that they can't get in touch with their guys, that the office is closed, that nobody is there except maybe once a month when they have their meetings. So some of those things, and again, you know, it's a volunteer group, and we appreciate that aspect of them serving the community. But at some point in time, it does become frustrating to folks who have a higher level of expectation. And what I'm really, really here for is the impact on our growth and development. So economic development is critical to certainly my municipality. We are one of the few municipalities in the state that are actually growing. The college towns, we're so fortunate to be a college town, but we are growing, and that growth and development requires that those services be available. I know of 2 businesses right now that cannot hook up to a water association because they are under a moratorium. They can't provide the pressure, they can't provide the water service. And so that growth and development is critical to our continued ability to attract people into our community. It is the Golden Triangle region, as you know, has got the aluminum plant, we've got the steel plant, we've got PACCAR. Yokohama, all of those, and it's bringing people into the community, but without the ability to provide those basic infrastructure services, it's going to restrict our ability to grow. And that includes not just residential, but it includes businesses. And so it is critically important that we are able to do that, particularly if the state wants to grow, which it does. I mean, obviously we do. We are dying from people leaving us. We want them to come in and stay, and if we bring jobs, we want them to have places to live. And so that does require those critical infrastructures, water and wastewater being one of them. The other thing that I have noted, and again, I'm not trying to throw stones at anybody, but we are in a position as a municipality, we are in a position to plan ahead better than some of these rural water associations, which again are volunteer organizations. They all have aging infrastructure, just like we do, but they are less able, I think, to incorporate the kinds of professional services that we are able to grasp with our board, our very professional department. So we are planning ahead. Right now, we are looking at aging infrastructure that we're having to, as Mr. Kemp said, potentially raise rates for in order to just provide those areas that are aging beyond their ability to keep us from going out. We're doing a data-driven approach to how we're fixing our infrastructure. And so, you know, we looked at, starting in 2018, it's actually before Mr. Kemp, we started in 2018 looking at where we were spending the most time doing maintenance. And that's where we began. And we wholesale replacement of infrastructure in some of our subdivisions. And we are going now through that process all over town. And that includes, you know, getting grants and assistance from the federal folks and the state for funding from ARC for improving water lines in this Bluefield area. As a matter of fact, we have a grant that's going to support the Bluefield area. We have an ARC grant. So all of those things come together in ways that we are able to possibly, encourage the expenditures and the funding coming from the federal and the state sources in ways that perhaps the rural water associations are less able to do. And again, that planning is part of that. You know, how do you plan? We're planning 20 years out. We just did a wastewater and a water assessment that takes us 20 years out. What's it going to cost us? How are we going to take our rates, and what are we going to do with those rates in order to pay for each one of those upgrades? And it's $40 million. I mean, 40 million for one and roughly 40 million for the other. So you're looking at some vast expenditures for us to bring ourselves up to date. I think that rural water associations don't necessarily have that view of the growth and development, economic development that a municipality does. And that, again, not their fault. That's not what they're intended to do. They were intended to serve a group. But as we focus on our growth, I think it's incredibly important that they understand and are part of the process, or else let us fix it for them. Let us be part of that so that we can make that growth and economic development happen in our communities. So I am happy to answer any questions. That's pretty much what I wanted to come say to y'all, because right now it frustrates me greatly that we've got businesses that want to grow and cannot do so. And with all that development that's going on in the Golden Triangle, I want us to be able to prosper from those people coming in. I want them to come live in Starkville. I want them to come live in the Golden Triangle region. And again, I can't possibly be the only municipality with this as an issue. So I think it's something that we needed to highlight and talk about and see if there's a fix for it.
100%. And some of the cases you're talking about, I'm obviously aware of because we're helping them. One particular one that was developing a subdivision, and they couldn't get a connection. And so that person was in our office just so exacerbated about what to do. And I asked the question, have you been to the mayor's office and talked to him? No. Well, go talk to the mayor. She'll tell you exactly what's going on and how we get to where we're going and why the city's doing what they're having to do. And I think that issue was the sewer. There was the capacity of the sewer system had been up to 90% capacity or 80, whatever the capacity is.
We're in the mid-80s, I believe. Is that not correct? On the water. Oh, he's talking about
Sewer, on the sewer side.
Mid-80s on.
Yeah. And so, to your point, that's restricting people investing in our community. And Now, that is a residential and some commercial, but it does impact our citizens in the state. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. Another one you mentioned is the rural water associations. I'm on rural water. It's great. But to your point, Starkville's growing into those areas, and if they cannot provide the services, what are the people in those areas supposed to do? Just go without services and there's no economic development in that area? Is that like a just a void? Or do we figure out a way to try to get that, to your point, what you're talking about, figure out a way, either co-op or something, and one of the presenters mentioned earlier, maybe they can buy water, there's a merger that they can buy water from somebody, I don't know, but it is frustrating to know the issues and trying to figure those out, and that's one of the reasons we're here.
Well, and I appreciate it. And we've got a whole lot of smart people in this room and that we have as resources. There's got to be a way to make this happen, to figure this out so that the burden isn't totally, the rural water associations have to have customers, and I understand that. But at the same time, if we are in a position where we can serve, just like Bluefield and just like the Old West Point Road Water Association, where we can serve these people, then I think service to the community is the biggest piece of what we want to be able to do, as well as extend greater economic development opportunities in those areas.
Because economic development it's a small world somewhat. If they think Starkville's closed and Oktibbeha County is closed for business, then it's going to be less and less opportunity. So it's critical that we help solve these issues somehow. And I think everybody that came to this summit has a direct impact in that, with the legislature and the rural water and municipal and DEQ and all the people that came and participated. We can come up with a solution. I honestly think we can.
I believe we can too. We got smart people.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you so much. Is there anything else I can?
Commissioner Carr?
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Commissioner.
believe in unity and everybody working together.
All right, thank you so much.
Because our state the world is noticing us, and we need to come together and start working together. And I believe we can do that. It's not what Chris and I want or Commissioner Stamp wants, it's what the citizens need and our state needs. And that's what our focus is as a commission, is to bring it all together. And I believe we can do that.
Absolutely.
And Commissioner Stamp's in here, but we are unified as a commission to try to come up with the solutions to help Mississippians, just like you are, just like everybody that presented today are. So that's the whole purpose and the goal, and I do think we'll get there. Even if I think there may be some legislators that are listening too.
Well, I think there may be, somewhere in the back there.
I didn't mention any names. But
Me either.
I see one of them.
Thank you so
But
much.
any questions for how can we help you? Any questions how we can work better with this?
Well, y'all have been wonderful to work with and very responsive, and we appreciate that. But, this is one of those things that I think none of us have absolute control over. It's going to take a collaboration, and how can we make that happen? But, where we are able to serve is what we want to do, because I do think it's at the end of the day, it's the constituents who deserve to have water and be able to use their property and use their land to its fullest extent. So I do think in the end, we can figure it out. That'll be the bottom line. But perhaps if we get with the legislature, we can work something through. But thank you again. I appreciate it. So Edward, do you have anything?
Thanks, Mayor, and appreciate your service. I mean, Starkville's a great town.
I don't have anything else unless there's questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you so much for your presentation, and y'all know how to get me, and both of y'all do a great job. I know one of my team members are here, and he's like, I got a very detailed and good email from Mr. Kemp. I was like, good. So appreciate y'all. Okay, the next one, we're just going to consolidate the next two. If you can, the slide, the presentation. What we're gonna do now, there's people send us pictures about water systems and issues in their areas, and so some of the staff members just compiled some pictures with different issues, and so as we pull them up, we'll explain what the issue is, and then we can try to figure out what is the resolution to some of it. And again, it won't be exhaustive. It's just what some of our people are asking the question on. They notice this in a pump house or this or that and the services that they're getting, and why is it that way? It's going to be a little bit less intuitive than what we wanted because it's kind of a slide deck. But up in our area, one of the biggest issues is with Aberdeen. We have a lot of questions about Aberdeen. And so the folks that are here that have like health department and I guess it'd be municipal rural water, but again, we're not trying to the mayor's point, she reiterated and Commissioner Carr did as well, we're not trying to highlight negative things, but we have to point out things that are issues for us to try to say, okay, how do we resolve that one? Aberdeen's has an aging infrastructure, and so they're not providing water properly to the citizens. That was the previous slides. Sorry, guys, it's going to be difficult to get through those. Yes. What is wrong with these pictures? I don't see that screen. Oh, the different ones? So I think this is from the Southern District. That's from the,
Oh, that's from the Southern District.
Yeah.
You have to back up.
so these are the Aberdeen slides. So they're having a hard time with the water system and continually failing and having a very difficult time. So I don't know how we, I guess the question is, well, let's get to the other one first. We'll get to that one. How do we resolve issues like municipalities that either don't have the technical ability or the manpower or the funds to fix the system? And again, the ratepayers call us wanting us to do anything. It's not really under our purview. We don't have any direct authority over it. So how do we as a group solve those issues, I guess? I don't know if anybody's here that can help answer those questions, but we don't control Aberdeen, sir. Aberdeen is controlled by the city. So we don't. Those the ones, I don't know about those, but the ones we're talking about, again, specifically, when we said the Aberdeen is the Aberdeen system, and it's a decrepit system, and it needs help. So, again, those are kind of the issues, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Carr if he wants to comment on the Southern District photos.
Okay, on this picture right here, back up, or that picture. I believe on that picture right there, there's leaks. You got to come up front. On that picture there, which I think that's in Hancock County. Well, no, that's in Harrison County, on the point, Picture Point. I think that's where that picture is there. One, see the tank is leaning? Pretty bad. It's going to get to that point where it's going to fall over. And also there's leaks just about on some of those that we went to, especially in Harrison Hancock area, they were leaking at some point. And some of them was on the tank itself. On one of them, there was a bleed valve on the bottom. that once that leak gets bigger, it's gonna empty the tank. Because it's on the very bottom, it's got a leak. Some of it was on chlorine, a couple of them, we smelt the gas. Some of the cylinders were sitting outside of the area, is what Mr. Wells was talking about. They're not secured. And at one of your facilities there in Wool Market, you had the flag on it. That's the only two that we've seen that had flags on them. Like you told me about the gas, knowing which way to run when it starts leaking. None of the other facilities had those. So I'm sure that's across the board. As far as some of the lagoon systems, some of the wiring, which, you know, I'm an electrician, that's the first thing I'm gonna look at, it's not safe. I mean, it's there, and I know y'all acquired these systems, I understand that. We just need to know when you're gonna get up to date. We're not also looking at affordability, we're looking at reliability. We're also looking at safety too. We don't want one of your workers to get hurt, or anyone there working. And some of the fence around the perimeters, we don't want children to get in there. There was one lift station that we looked at, the well, the lift station well, the doors were wide open, and it was right by a house. But we addressed that, sent them pictures, they fixed it that same day, and I thank them for that. That was a very, very dangerous, especially with a house right next door to it. It's just those type of things that we're gonna start looking at, and we're gonna address them and get on board. We want them to be, you know, affordable, reliable, and we want them to be safe. That's from my standpoint. You can go to the next one.
Can you go to the next one, or does it have to play through?
Also, one of the other questions is, do y'all have backup pumps for your aerators on your lagoon systems? This one here was leaking also. And see the tank standing there? They're not even strapped off. An empty cylinder is just as bad as a full cylinder. See, there's no flags on that storage where the chlorine's at. There's no flags. This one here, is this? This is in Windance, I think. Is this in Windance? Brent? Ocean Springs, okay. And as far as security lights, if you have to come out there at night, I seen one of them, it was, the photo cell was going on, it's operating all the time. So, just small things like that that we're looking at to make sure. That one there, I think, is over in Bay St. Louis, or Pastor's Gin. See, there's no orange flag on that one. And I didn't notice, it seems like there's a lock on that one. Some of them I don't think had locks on their doors. Okay, you see the tape on the pressure switch? That was on about 3 of them. You see at the top of the tank? That was on about 3 of them, same kind of tank. You see the valve, the pressure? It's at 0. It's full of water. Yeah. Okay. There's one there with the, I don't understand the temporary air compressor. Yeah. Yeah, but you know how reliable that little compressor is? Yeah. You see how close out there's a swimming pool in the backyard. think this one here was leaking also, this tank. Yeah. Just small maintenance things that we're looking at from the ones we looked at, and we didn't look at all of them. But it's those type of things that concerns me that we need to be, be more attentive to, especially when you open up a well and both doors are open. So, and that they should have locks on them, and a lot of them didn't have locks. That's yours.
That's what we went over earlier. So totally separate issue here. These are just pump stations and just pictures of a municipal system that, again, we're not being critical, but whatever we need to try to help them get on the right path. And some of that Kirby was talking about, and I don't know if his crew's been up there trying to help Aberdeen or not. Kirby, you in the room? Okay, thanks, Kirby. So anyway, that's only the pictures we had, I think. You're right, Josh? Yeah. So now we'll go into the just Q&A side. Any questions from the audience? Comments? From any of the presenters, after hearing the other presenters, any follow-ups from Department of Health or anybody that presented? Just like they say in church, all minds clear. We're not passing a plate, but Mr. Herring? Okay.
Commissioner, again, thank you for having this meeting. As we had said earlier, rural water associations are public utilities just like energy and all of the electrical companies, the gas companies. And they're not afraid of the truth, and they're not afraid of the facts. They want to have all of the protections that other public utilities have, and they want all the responsibilities. And we all got feet of clay. We're all trying to do a job, and it's no problem. We're not afraid to see pictures of where they come up short and where improvement needs to be made. I will say to the commission, if you don't mind, this issue between municipalities and rural water associations has been bandied around for about 50 years during my practice. And I thought all of these main issues were resolved through these previous cases. The idea that asking for legislation to take rural water associations' rights away from them through legislation on the theory that some economic development might take place, that's an old argument and a scurrilous argument. What we forget is what we said to begin with. Rural water associations have private property rights, and you can't take those away just on a whim saying, well, we're going to bring in some economic development. We've heard that for years. In the Bear Creek Madison case, they were having Chamber of Commerce resolutions about how Bear Creek Water Association was a bad citizen because they were trying to protect their certificated area. Well, today, that was Canton. And today, Bear Creek is 19,000 meters. And what's in the public interest? What we have today with Canton or what we have with Bear Creek? The point is, there are ways to solve these problems. There are complaints that can be made to the Public Service Commission. You don't need legislation for all of that. All you got to do is file a complaint with the commission and have a hearing. And if there are things that need to be corrected, the commission can do that. The idea of this last effort to have legislation passed in the legislature that would take certificated areas away from cities just because they're within the municipal boundaries of the city was unconstitutional and ill-advised. And we need to be very careful about that, and I can assure you that Mississippi Rural Water Association will not stand by idly with that kind of legislation being offered in the legislature. What we need to do is to serve the public interest. Municipalities need to, as best they can, in rural water associations, as best they can, they need to try to work together to provide the reliable water and sewer service to customers. This idea that municipalities can do it better, that's an old story that has been debunked years ago. All that we need to do is give rural water associations the proper engineers, the proper attorneys to protect their rights, and then these problems can be solved before the commission with complaints. This Bluefield case that was mentioned earlier, that was a situation that I was involved in. And when I was hired by Bluefield Water Association, we found that the city had taken, just basically trespassed and taken over a portion of the certificated area of the Water Association out there around Highway 12 intersection. And so litigation was filed to try to stop any future encroachments in the nature of a trespass. And we went to federal court on that, into the Fifth Circuit. And so, right in the middle of that litigation, a run was made to try to replace the board of directors at the annual meeting. And that's why that case was ultimately settled. It wasn't because Bluefield came to the city asking for help. It was because they were taken over at the board of directors at an annual meeting. My point being, this is old news, old arguments, and this idea about doing something in the name of economic development does not necessarily translate into economic growth, which is what we really need, rather than some public planner saying, well, we created so many jobs. So that's the position we want to make clear, since this was presented with such frankness earlier. I'm sorry that we had to respond to it in kind, but that's our position.
Well, I think ultimately everybody should be on the same page. What is best for the ratepayer?
And we can.
So, and I think that's the point.
In good faith.
I do think that if we work together with the focus of the people and not ourselves, and I'm not saying you are, but we have to get all of our, I guess, our sabers back in the sheath overall and be a unified voice for the people. And I know that's what you're saying, and I know that's what the mayor was saying, and everybody is trying to march to that same drum. Now, we may have different views in how to get there, and I think that's why this discussion has started, because we're new. We are here to try to make the Public Service Commission work for the people. And I think that's our goal. Well, Commissioner Carr and Commissioner Stamps and my goal is to say, okay, it has been long, to your point, it's been going on a long time. How do we solve each individual issue that helps the ratepayer without disrupting everything else? And to Starkville's point, you know, that Tibahaw County area, that Golden Triangle, is the one experiencing the most growing pains.
Right,
And
we agree.
But again, we can solve, I mean, everybody was in this room today that can help solve that problem. And I think if we work together, that we can figure out a way forward that helps the ratepayer and helps the citizens of Mississippi in a way that does no harm.
We agree. We ask that it be kept in mind that we're talking about valuable property rights, and we're not talking about some great crisis that is upon us. When you look at those that are in moratorium, it's not the rural water associations. It's the private companies like this Ronnie, who just spoke up to you, who was a private water association that had its rates regulated by the commission. And so we just ask you to keep in mind that we're talking about private property rights that cannot be taken away, particularly under 1926B. And so we ask the commission to consider those things as it moves forward.
appreciate it. Like I said, I think we're all unified to benefit the people of the state. I think that's one thing we all agree on, and I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
The Bluefield Water Association, I was around for that. I was the chief administrative officer at the time, and so he's absolutely correct. There was an issue. But I think the bottom line is that when the homeowners in that area did make a change in the ownership, of the water association, they made that decision. So it is a somewhat democratic organization, is it not? As the homeowners, they come together and make those decisions. And so in this case, they felt like that was the proper thing to do. So yes, there was that lawsuit, but I do believe that the homeowners, once they got together and decided that's what they wanted to do, or the clients, or the customers, or the owners, the collective owners of that association, they decided that that's what they wanted to do. So I do think that that is one of those things that we overlook, is that while there are private property rights, I suppose from a legal standpoint, that also, those belong to those homeowners, or those residents, or those property owners. And so I think that when they make those decisions, it's appropriate for us to be responsive, and that's why we took an area, the Bluefield area, because that was what they asked us to do, and we wanted to provide those services. And I think we've done that. So, thank you.
That's happened in a few places. I think we saw another one in a college town, to where there was a water system that was troubled, and people kind of took over the board. Now they're joining with the local municipality. But again, that was the decision of the people, of the board of that organization, which, again, as we learned earlier, as Kirby laid out, that's their right. The people own that system. So if the members of that system band together and say, hey, we want to merge with this one, that's their right to do that. And I think that's I don't think anybody's opposed to that. That's the will of the people. So as we defend the will of the people, those things are going to happen. And so, and it's legal. Hopefully they're better service. I don't know about Bluefield, but the one in Lafayette County, I think, is going to, everybody's happy there, I think, singing Kumbaya, last I heard. Any other questions, comments? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I personally am appreciative to everybody that presented. We were just talking at lunch how much we've learned, and we kept a couple legislators here way longer than I ever thought they'd stay, so it must have been interesting for them too. So again, I appreciate the effort, and I do want to have a unified effort to try to keep the ratepayers and the people of Mississippi as our main goal. And I know our personal goals, and which are not necessarily negative, can kind of get in the way sometime of the struggles and the trials of the people that are in that situation are going through. So it's not a crisis for the whole, but it is a crisis for the few. So how do we help them? We can't ignore any of our citizens. So if we can help them in that crisis, resolve that issue together, that's what we need to do, and that's our goal, is to try to help facilitate that. We as a public service commissioners don't want to be dictators. We just want to help facilitate the solutions to these festering problems. And I think that's our unified effort of this group. Commissioner Stamps, Commissioner Carr are on board to try to help come up with these solutions. Number one, identify the problems. Number two, what's causing it. Number three, a corporate solution that satisfies the problem or fixes the problem. Commissioner Carr.
Yeah, to the point of unity and working together. In our district, in the Southern District, we had an issue where there was two companies, and it was, we sat down like adults, and we discussed it, and we talked about it, and there was a resolution. You know, we didn't have to drag it on. We got the problem solved, and that's what we're looking for. You know, problems to be solved. Our citizens have a hard enough time, you know, paying their utility bills, paying their grocery bills, and we just want everybody to work together. We're trying to alleviate that pressure off of them, that they don't have to worry about that. But also in the same token, we understand y'all are, you know, you have a responsibility. You have to make a profit. You have people you got to pay. You got bills to pay. But our citizens also have that too. And so we're just trying to get it to where, everybody's looking out for everybody. I'm trying to get unity with the commission, working with MDEQ, Mr. Wells, the health department, just everybody working together. And the municipalities, I've talked to them in my district, seeing what their needs are. That's all we're trying to do, is get a dialogue started to knowing where our future is, because our state is on the move. We're on the radar now, so we got to be prepared, because growth is going to come. And the worst thing you can do, as myself being a developer, you don't like to hear that word moratorium when you're going into a city. That's not good. So we need to work out those things in the future. I've read, and I've said it many times, we're looking through a microscope right now, but we're also looking through a telescope all at the same time. And there's a balance that we're working with. And it's hard because the ball's always moving, because our friends in Washington, D.C. they move pretty quick and at a fast pace in the opposite direction that we're trying to go most of the time. So we have to try to stay ahead of them. And communication, if you hear something out there that we need to be aware of, I beg and plead that y'all bring it to us. And don't, we don't want to be like mushrooms. We want to be kept in the light, not in the dark. Thank y'all.
Appreciate that, Commissioner Carr. And again, I'll echo what Commissioner Carr's saying. We just want to be that facilitator to solve issues. And any way that we can help any of y'all, from rural water to municipal to MDEQ to health department, we're here to help. We may not always agree, but we're always going to sit down and try to come up with a resolution with the lens of what's best for the people. And so I know that's everybody's goal in this room. Thank y'all so much for participating. Thank you for the fantastic presentation, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks.
Thank you.